Hello guys, today we will be talking about what if Naruto had time travel jutsu part 2. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let's begin. Hit him with what? A snide voice replied, coming from the corner of his peripheral. Your non-existent breasts. You moron. Ah. And apparently the watering can just hit someone else's head. The girl with the disturbing face turned around again, a curious expression to her. So sorry about that. But, what are you doing, anyway? Her hair was short and swung up on her head in a small ponytail. She braced her weight on one leg in a defiant manner, canting her hip, watering can at her side. Her brown eyes were big and blinked down at him in curiosity. It was the face though, which completed the picture. Tsunade. He gaped, and then sputtered. And then tried not to scream. Is something wrong, Tsunade-chan? Came a voice in mild vexation. The amount of resignation ladled into the worn words told him things tended to go wrong quite frequently. The girl spun around quickly, voice sheepish. Not really, sensei. And with a brief glance to Naruto, there was a boy sleeping in the watermelon patch, though. The man came into view. Naruto blinked. Oh god. Oh god. The Sandaime Hokage. Young. Sarutobi gave him a familiarly pleasant smile. Oh? And who might you be? Naruto began, with varying degrees of panic rising in his voice. And with frightening came Jiraiya's voice, trust no one. Aye. Naruto sputtered some more. The Sandaime was patient, however, and only nodded and waited. Tsunade and a morbidly younger version of Jiraiya leaned closer with equal interest. Well, I make sure to be cautious. Don't go around telling anyone who you are, and for Christ's sake, especially not your heritage. Even if they're familiar faces, remember that once wrong word and you may mess up the whole future. Remember the ninja code. Keep your guard up. Trust no one, you hear me? Trust no one. The sealing paper began to heat, the seals lighting in the most brilliant shade of blue Naruto had ever seen, ascending into the sky at an alarming rate and burning a glow of azure around the delighted blonde. He looked up to his teacher, whose eyes were wide and frightened, but imploring. See ya, Uro-sennin. The glow of the seal shot to the sky, before they faded into a wispy charcoal black on the rice paper. Jiraiya stared at it with a mix of emotions, the wind fluttering on the top of the hill, making the edges of the paper lift a bit. Then, he sighed. He better not screw this up. Naruto felt like someone just hit him on the back of the head with a large, tin object. Then realized someone had. A watering can, in fact. He'd been conscious for about a half a second and was halfway into a sitting position before the preemptive strike collided with the bottom half of his brain, and successfully toppled him face first into the dirt. The blonde groaned and attempted to wiggle his hands out from underneath him to feel for the blow, in the process eating more dirt than he'd have liked. Behind him, he heard a shocked gasp. Sensei. I think I might have hit him. And then, with emphasis, on accident. Accident his ass, Naruto thought to himself as he pulled himself up in an attempt to see his assailant. He saw nothing of what he assumed was a whiny little girl, though his face was met with the largest watermelon he'd ever seen in his life. If his head was the size of the moon then this thing had to be twice the size of the earth. He sat straighter, only to realize that every other watermelon in the patch resembled this one in bust and length. Dotting the horizon was a small farmhouse. Naruto was pretty sure they didn't even make them this large anymore. Great, he probably crash-landed in the middle of nowhere, probably a desert, probably Suna. Was this really his lot in life? Forever waylaid by fate's constant jackassery? Instead, he was met with the view of an enormous city, the infamous Konoha gates looming in the distance, just as he remembered them. And before them, something even more familiar. Watch it. Jiraiya barked as he strayed too far to the left, completely upending Naruto's concentration. Gah! Naruto jumped, nearly spraying the ink all over the paper. It wasn't working, however. Look, kid. Jiraiya began irately. Fix the smudge in the right translation, know your other right. And then double back to the left and fix the one near the upper right corner. Naruto grumbled in response, settling into a more comfortable position to paint. After fixing most of the errors until the seal was near perfection, Jiraiya paced relentlessly back and forth with vigor, sending furtive glances to the seal, and then to the ground, continuously instilling an unwilling nervousness in the blonde the longer he went at it. The seal was perfect already. What more did it need? He thought Jiraiya was just being overly worrying. "Hello?" Naruto waved a hand. "Can I go yet?" "No." Naruto pulled away, frowning. Jiraiya began to pace again, this time in a circular motion. "Now? No. Now? No. Now? God damn it." Jiraiya cursed, looking ready to breathe fire. "If you keep acting like a whiny, immature then I'll kick you out right now and burn this paper to ashes." Naruto opened his mouth. Wahey silence. And promptly snapped it shut. Then the pacing began anew, the man changing the patterns depending on his thought. Sideways, in circles, in long wavy lines, until finally Jiraiya became unoriginal and just paced in a straight line. Naruto watched him with a frown, looking quite sullen. He'd been waiting for months for this opportunity, and Jiraiya looked halfway to blowing the whole project up and calling it a day. But the blonde had put too much time, effort, and hope into the finalization of this seal that he'd be more than a bit dismayed if Jiraiya called it quits. In fact, he'd probably just do it himself, to hell with all the chances. And then finally, he sighed for the umpteenth time that day. "Okay. Go." Naruto jumped in his joy, pouncing onto his glowing seals and began his long set of hand seals. Jiraiya swapped him on the back of the head again, for good measure, sending him toppling into the grass. "It matters, Gaki. This is just a simple mistake, maybe change your hair green, but what if it was in the center graph? You could botch the entire thing. Move your spleen to your lungs. But it's not. But what if it was? What's with all the what-ifs? I'm fine." Clearly Naruto's inability to see reason would win over his brain every time. Jiraiya slapped his forehead. Of all the genius seal makers in the world, of all the hard workers with determination, skill and luck, this boy seemed to be the one who just didn't understand. He sucked techniques like a vacuum, but precautions went out the window. Jiraiya begrudgingly thought it had something to do with Kyuubi. The fox simply patched the boy up no matter what happened. It was a truly unbecoming way to learn the responsibilities and repercussions of incredibly dangerous actions. Jiraiya tried a different approach. "I know that you're a bit reckless, Naruto, and I'm aware that, for some unfathomable reason, it seemed to work pretty good for you in the past. But one of these days that's all gonna catch up to you. You gotta think things through, you know? Really take the time to learn everything, even all the what-ifs, cause one of these days they'll really bite you in the ass." Naruto huffed, though his eyes were wide and understanding. "I know, you old senin. You act like I still run around and paint the Hokage mountain in neons, piss a Viruka-sensei and get into fights I know I can't win. I'm not like that anymore." Jiraiya wanted to point out that the latter of the three had already been done, this morning in fact, but refrained. Instead, he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine. Do a once-over." Naruto's grin split his face. He won. So he turned around and began to check his seal, currently glowing a brilliant shade of blinding blue. There were 4 parts, the center, and the most important, the 2 flanking at the top and 2 at the bottom. Each were circular in pattern. Each contained so many little details that looking at it to check made his head spin. Sealing graphs were like math equations and languages. It had only been a few hours and already it was starting to give him a headache. "Have you looked?" Jiraiya called, just this side of nagging. "Made sure? Everything's in order?" If Naruto hadn't known any better, he'd have thought Jiraiya was just being a cranky, impatient old man. But he was aware that everything Jiraiya had done this morning, from struggling up the hill to painting the seals, had been carried a vague sense of trepidation. A wariness, an unease, that settled predominantly because of him. Because of concern for him. The idea was touching enough that it stilled some of Naruto's lesser words for the man. "Yeah." The blonde nodded. "I looked." The Sannin stepped forward to inspect the graphs himself. It only took a matter of seconds. 15 graphs to the right, center fold. You messed up. The units are supposed to be translated from the right, not the left. Naruto made a noise of frustration, whether at Jiraiya for being so quick about it, or for himself for making the mistake in the first place. One would never know taking an ink and quill and redoing it on the rice paper. He tried to be careful not to ruin it. Naruto surmised that the reason no one ever took him seriously clearly had to do with his unastounding height of 5'6". If he was any taller, certainly people would take him more seriously. As a ninja, and as a person though invariably, he'd ruined the latter of the two through the notorious and infamous pranks of his youth. Alright. So that may have something to do with it. But undoubtedly he'd done his fair share of growing up since then, anyone would say so. Well, perhaps not Sakura-chan. Or Kakashi-sensei. Or, for that matter, Jiraiya. Who, still, since the two had trekked up the hill that sunrise, continued his deep and uninterrupted monologue on the variables of sealing that Naruto had already learned, had never found a use for, or just plain were never in use to begin with. The blonde had attempted an intervention twice, each of the times had the young shinobi hazarding a round kick to the face and a furthering of the winded, one-sided conversation. This is very dangerous, Naruto. He pattered on, as he had been for the better part of the morning. You could get severely hurt or worse. Damage the entire fate of the world by messing up and opening your goddamn mouth. Jeez, Jiraiya. Naruto interrupted, and ducked the swing he knew was coming. You've been talking in circles all morning. Can't we get a move on? A supremely dangerous look crossed the old Sannin's face. A move on? Clearly, Naruto, we can't, if you're not taking this serious enough and have enough energy to pick your ear when you should be devoting all of it to listening. Guiltlessly, the blonde popped his index out of his said hearing appendage, before yawning unceremoniously. Yesh. He muttered to himself. Guy can't catch a break around here? And then, louder, and with a valiant attempt at keeping the whine out of his voice, come on you old pervert, we've been studying this for months. I get it already. You don't. That's the point. You're about to do something that hasn't and shouldn't ever been done before. This gave him pause. Well, yeah. But I'm doing it anyways, right? The Sannin wore a look of clear anger and exasperation. There was nothing that would skyrocket his blood pressure more than a kid with a mulish head and a bravery streak a mile wide, who wanted nothing more than to prove himself. And he'd had his fair share of those. Though Naruto was different than Nagato, Yahiko, or Konan. And not just because he was Minato's son. He was the first to truly grasp such a complex concept so naturally, and there was a strange mixture of pride and anxiety he got like a blow to the gut each time he thought of the boy. There was a feeling of satisfaction that welled in his stomach when he thought of how far Naruto had come, and yet dually, it warred with the constant threat of how easily this could destroy the last vestige of Minato he'd ever have. Mostly though, Jiraiya just wished Naruto would understand how precautious he should be when it came to this sealing business. It certainly wasn't the most blunt of art, and Naruto, if anything, was a tactless, blunt kind of guy. Jiraiya shook his head. No. Naruto would probably never appreciate the effervescent subtleties of this unique trade. Yes, you are. Jiraiya supposed with a sigh. But really, you have to be careful. I won't always be here to check your seals for mistakes, brat. I know. Though in retrospect, the blonde would come to realize he really didn't know, in any sense of the word. But for now, he was under the complete impression that whatever life, and in this case, sealing, could throw at him, he'd take it like a man and throw it back in its face. See? The gray-haired sage waved wildly, smacking the blonde upside the head before he could dodge. You're just saying that, if you did. Jiraiya pointed out a mistake in graphing near the center left of the glowing blue seal. Then you would have noticed that you misplaced this fracture. It's supposed to be 3 units to the right. Naruto groaned, bending down with an ink pot to fix the mistake, careful not to smudge the remaining characters on the paper. He finished the line of characters, rolling on his heels to study it with a bored expression. Gah. What does it matter anyway? You summoned me? Naruto said, as he knocked on the door. The Sandame's office was chalky with toxic smoke, The man sitting in sharp relief of the sifting haze, seeming intent to stare into the equally hazy depths of his crystal ball. At Naruto's voice he looked up, pushing it to his side. "I did." He nodded. Naruto reread the scroll, looking incredulous. "You're giving me a mission?" The old man gave him a magnanimous smile. "Well, it would look a tad strange for a jounin of Konoha to be lounging around, missionless, don't you agree?" "I suppose so," Naruto answered slowly. "But am I really the right ninja for the job?" "You're the only ninja for the job," the Sandame affirmed, a twinkle in his eye. "You'll be leaving tomorrow morning, 0700, and I expect you'll be meeting your traveling companions at the Eastern Gates." "Companions?" Naruto echoed, looking down at his mission scroll. "But this says it's a solo mission." "To Omega-cure, yes." Sarutobi nodded, before smiling dryly. "You'll find that you aren't the only one traveling in that direction." Not entirely understanding, Naruto only nodded slowly, bowing, before letting himself out. This would be his very first time receiving a solo mission from the Sandame Hokage. To think, the last time he'd stood in that office for mission briefing he'd come in a little genin on another Team 7, with one lazy sensei, one brooding boy and a happy little girl. Now he was exiting a young jounin, clutching an A-rank mission in his hand. After mulling over the Sandame's words throughout the night and well into gloaming, Naruto wasn't entirely surprised to see Team 7 waiting around the edge of Konoha. "Naruto-kun." Rin perked up as he took the stairs down to the gate 2 at a time. He grinned. "I had a feeling I'd be traveling with you guys." "You're on a mission?" Obito's eyes grew wide. "So cool. Where to?" "Omega-cure." "You're traveling with us?" Obito yelped out, enthusiasm growing tenfold. "No way. This is going to be the best mission ever." "Sensei, does that mean we get to do Naruto's mission, too?" "Absolutely not." The yandame cut in. "Naruto will only be traveling with us there. I'm sure whatever he's up to is a little more than our C-rank retrieval mission." Obito pouted. "No fair. What rank is your mission, Naruto?" "A." The blonde smiled. "But it really isn't as much fun as you think it is." "Sounds like jounin work." Minato appraised. Naruto shrugged. "I'm just glad to be back in the swing of things." To be quite honest, Minato was just pleased to see the blonde in relatively good health. Seeing him on that hospital bed hadn't been easy for the older blonde. Seeing Naruto doing anything but smiling happily seemed wrong. "Minato-sama." The chonin at the guard post bowed lowly, and Minato bit back a groan. "Tetsuo-san," he greeted, amiably enough. Naruto was impressed he even knew their names. "Susuke-san. Everything's good up here?" "It's as to be expected," said Tetsuo with a pleased grin. "A bit busy for today, but everything's going smoothly." "I'm glad to hear it." Minato nodded, smiling. No wonder the textbooks had referred to him as the People's Hokage. The sunny blonde turned towards his team. "You guys ready to go?" "Yes." Rin and Obito chorused. Kakashi just looked vaguely annoyed with his sensei's cheer. Naruto had never been to Omega-cure, but as he had suspected, the majority of the landscape was plotted with thick, obscuring trees, a damp cloying humidity hanging heavily in the air. The country of rain, and by default, rainforests, had to be the most buggy, unnaturally warm climate he'd ever been in. And for a well-traveled jounin, that was surely saying something. You know, Omega-cure is a natural phenomenon completely untouched by time. Some of their rivers have been around for centuries. Who knows what kinds of exotic biological species reside in their depths? I'm surprised no one's ever tried to look before. Obito gave Kakashi a flat look, which for once, the younger shinobi met with equal regard. "What's wrong with this girl?" he snorted. "I'm sure that's not exactly true, Rin-chan," said Naruto neutrally. "Last I hear this place was completely ravaged by he, luckily, cut himself off before he betrayed any secrets about Hanzo the Salamander from his history lessons, in a time when they weren't exactly just history lessons." "By what?" Rin peeked, curiously. Dinosaurs?" Naruto ended lamely. Obito chortled as Kakashi gave him a disbelieving look. Before Naruto makes a fool of himself further, Minato cut in swiftly, with an easy charm to his face. Why don't we start some training, huh? But sensei. Rin whined. We're in the middle of a mission. We can't just train now. Minato frowned, tilting his head. Why not? What Rin means is that we're walking. Obito explained further. We can't just stop. It'd take even longer to get to a Mega Cure then. Minato wagged his finger. Well, this is a different kind of training. Obito and Rin only skewered him with stark, disbelieving looks. These are high-speed exercises. Minato said with laugh. His entire team gave a collective, unison groan, which only seemed to amuse both him and Naruto further. Generally, ninja travel in the trees at higher speeds. This helps to lower detection and make for faster traveling times. We know, sensei. Rin complained, before adding, we've done it before. Naruto supposed this was probably true. This was Team Minato, which had been fighting in the Iwa War. Though they were just kids, they had more experience than their childish antics belied. Well, if you're so sure then, Minato rolled his eyes with a sly smirk, crouching deeply. Why don't you catch up to me then? And with that, he darted into the trees with impressive speed, so quick that even Naruto's trained eye only caught a glimpse of his green Jounin flak before it was gone completely. No fair. Rin cried in dismay. You already got a head start. But Team 7 leapt into the trees as well, leaving Naruto to stare bemusedly at the long, empty forest path. Minato was the fastest shinobi to have ever lived. He was probably miles away from Naruto by now. Not that the blonde was bothered, no, there was a much simpler solution to catching up to the older blonde. Naruto pulled out the three-pronged kunai, looping it around his finger once, twice, before throwing it into the forest at breakneck speed. He gave it a second, before he brought up the hand seal, disappearing as well. Minato heard the whir of the kunai rather than saw it, just a sharp noise to his left slicing through the air, and then a blonde Jounin was leaping right beside him, so quick it was near unbelievable. The blonde grinned at him triumphantly, if not a little cockily. You're pretty fast. Minato noted, an impressed smile to his face. I could say the same to you. Naruto surmised, equally enjoying himself. Minato didn't want to give the boy an ego rush, but he certainly was impressed. It wasn't very often that anyone could match him in speed. In fact, it wasn't often that he met anyone near his level, at all. Though he'd never actually fought Naruto, the older blonde was almost curious to do so. Naruto seemed to know a lot about everything, no easy feat considering the vast repertoire. How would they match up side by side? You must have done a lot of speed training. Minato concluded, taking in the speed and ease Naruto had at this high velocity. I had a good head start on you. Naruto gave him a sly smirk. I cheated. He said, conspiratorially. Minato blinked. But how? There's a move I created, the yondaime began slowly, as if appraising if Naruto was ready to hear this. Called the Hirashid? I think it'd be a good move for you to learn. Naruto only smiled. I already know it. I bet it is. He agreed, airily. You'll have to teach it to me sometime. You'll have to teach me sometime. Minato shot back. Naruto blinked. You're the Hokage. He pointed out. Don't you know everything? Not at all. Minato scoffed. His piercing, ice-blue eyes were on Naruto once more, as if seeing right through him and picking him apart. Naruto swallowed. He sincerely hoped not. I'm sure you know a lot more than you let on. That enormous fire technique, the like of which he'd never seen before. And that Rasengan-type move, how did he come up with it? It had taken Minato nearly 3 years to make that move. He doubted anyone could do the same to such perfection. And a comment he'd made earlier, are you a Fuin Jutsu master? I hear they're all super cool sealing masters. Well yes, but I know a lot less than you think. Naruto answered honestly. He didn't really know much, himself, anyway. The majority of the insight he had came from the fact that he came from the future, where all the answers were laid bare with time. I'm sure you could teach me something. Minato wheedled, actually becoming interested in learning something from the other blonde. How about Fuin Jutsu? Naruto's eyes widened. And then narrowed. But aren't you good at that? Well yes. Minato supposed, taking a giant leap and almost overtaking the blonde Jounin. Naruto sped up with him, wondering how on earth Team Minato was going to catch up to them. But I've never seen a seal like yours before. Like mine? He must be referring to the Shikifuin, Naruto thought. And let's hope you never do. He shook his head of his thoughts. It's not really mine, Naruto explained. Someone, painted onto me, I guess. I didn't even make it though, if you don't mind me asking, Minato began slowly, though Naruto had a feeling he would. What does it do, exactly? Naruto answered with the truth. It seals away a separate part of my chakra. Now Minato was just confused. A separate part? But why? Why would anyone want to do that? Some people would kill for the amount of reserves Naruto had, or at least, suck him dry of them using some bizarre jutsu. To separate it was just crazy. Naruto shrugged. It's a very difficult chakra to use. He picked his words carefully. It's not really mine, you see. And it does crazy things to me. Not really yours? Now Naruto was just really not making sense. But how can that be? But Minato's attention was diverted, as Naruto looked ahead sharply, darting out of the way just as the two approached an enormous fallen tree their path. Naruto split left and Minato split right, the two landing heavily on opposite trees with an audible thunk. Quite a work of art. Minato had a few seconds to catch his breath, before he was diving back into the path of tree limbs, grabbing Rin and Kakashi before they too could barrel headfirst into the tree. Luckily, Naruto managed to haul Obito out of the way as well, the five of them breathing heavily from such physical strain. Well, that was a close one, Minato said with a laugh. That would have sucked to run into too. Rin gazed at the enormous tree, covered in moss and growing fungi. No kidding. She breathed, before her attention snapped away. Oh! Look at that mushroom. Kakashi and Obito sighed. Minato only rolled his eyes. I think that's enough training for today. Obito immediately bounded up to Naruto, gushing about how fast he was and how he might even be faster than Minato. Naruto took this all with a surprisingly modest head, insisting that Obito was only overreacting. But Minato found his eyes drawn to the other blonde. Anyway, what could Naruto have been referring to? The village hidden in the rain was, as Naruto assumed, exotically rainy. And not in the good way. Team Minato plus Naruto were heavily laden with their thick rain cloaks by the time the third day rolled around and they reached the main village. Mostly, it looked war-ravaged and a little reluctant to be allowing Konoha inside. But Minato gave them his most disarming smile, and that seemed to keep the disgruntled guards at bay. Will we be meeting you soon, Naruto-kun? Rin asked concernedly, as they were about to split to different hotels. Naruto gave her an easy, worryless smile. Of course. If not, I'll see you back at Konoha. Rin didn't look completely content with the answer, but Kakashi managed to drag her away before he could protest. Naruto hadn't meant to, but he accidentally met the fierce blue of Minato's eyes, the man conveying some sort of silent message that the blonde didn't understand, before turning away with his team. Sometimes, in the depths of those icy eyes, he could see the terrifying yondaime that dominated the Third Shinobi War, the impassive features depicted in his history book. Other times, he saw Minato-sensei, the easygoing, if not a tad perceptive leader of Team Minato, Team 7, who looked up to him with more adoration than necessary. And on the briefest of occasions, he saw a bit of himself. A bit of his father. The blonde made his way to his hotel, which was, in fact, very close to Team Minato's. Though Team 7 was under the impression Naruto was out aiding the village against some sort of local criminal organization, completely unaware that Naruto was meant to watch over them. Sarutobi had gotten word at Iwagakure's recent attempt to get rid of the yondaime through his team. Minato was probably aware his life was in danger. It would have been detrimental on the Sandaime's part not to have him aware, though Naruto didn't think the other man was aware that Naruto would be assisting in this as well. Though it was quite likely he had a hunch. Minato was oddly insightful like that. How unlucky that Naruto received nothing of that sharp astuteness. Naruto took in the vast, barren landscape, seeming devoid of life and nothing but a bold fixture of mud and dirt. Scars struggled through buildings and split the ground open in long strokes, and no one, out of the few people which hastily walked through the streets, seemed particularly surprised by them. The blonde looked up into the dim gloom, past the heavy mist that covered the ground in a thick, furtive carpet, and into the crooked skyline of buildings and crisscrossing telephone wires. This was a Megacure. This was Akatsuki. The blonde focused back onto the streets, navigating his way through the metallic landscape. Right now, a Megacure was coming to the end of a tumultuous civil war, resulting in Hanzo's overthrow and the rising of Akatsuki's reign. Right now, Team Minato was heading in the opposite direction, 3 of which were Konoha Chonin and 1, the Hokage to be. Naruto snorted. And whose great idea was it to bring them in here? As if a Megacure didn't hate them enough. This was practically baiting the country to do something in retaliation. The blonde's eyes widened. Perhaps that was what the Sandame had wanted, what Minato was trying to tell him without words. Though Akatsuki was attempting a full-scale wipeout of all Hanzo's loyal followers, many of them still lingered bitterly in the sprawling city's shadows, waiting patiently for Akatsuki to ease into complacency. For Konoha to fall into a self-assured security, lulled with satisfaction. The cunning old man must be using Minato as the bait, the sign that Konoha had well and truly decided its supreme rule, and now sat lavishly in amenity, resting on its victory. After all, why else would they send their newly appointed Yondaime and his team of Chonin into enemy lands? Naruto reached into his pocket for the mission scroll, perusing it once more. What an Abiakio! No wonder it had sounded so familiar. He'd been one of the biggest benefactors for Hanzo the Salamander during the Second World War, supplying money and weapons to a country who had had enough of fighting. It wasn't surprising that, at the turning point of the war, he disappeared flat off the map, leaving the Megacure to fend off the enemies it had made on its own. But if not even a dangerous band of S-class criminals could root him out of this capacious mass of alloy, how would a solo jounin from a foreign country? Naruto debated this as he checked into his lodgings, careful to take his high-tie off long before he'd even entered the city. That was where Minato came in, surely. It wouldn't take long for news to spread that the legendary Yellow Flash was inside the city, working such a menial job as retrieving a scroll from a diplomat. Was the other blonde aware of it, though? He'd given no indication, aside from that salient glance as they'd parted ways. After settling into his room and spreading out his various maps and mission details, Naruto slumped onto the bed, lost in thought. He near jumped right off it as Minato appeared next to him. Holy, the Yondaime grinned, delving into Naruto's bag and looping out a 3-pronged kunai from one of the pockets. Didn't even notice I'd put it in there, he said, though the arrogance was almost endearing. Naruto gave him a narrow-eyed glare. Didn't think I had to watch my back with my own comrades. It was for your own good. Minato shrugged cheerfully, dropping himself onto the desk chair. I'm sure you've figured it out by now. Shouldn't you be with your team? Naruto asked quickly. They'll be a liability without you, they can handle themselves. Minato waved him off, before adding, I've also trapped the entire hotel and room, and sealed the door from foreign intruders. Naruto laughed. Overkill? You never know, said the other blonde, seriously. At any rate, luring Watanabe out of his comfort zone will be difficult, even with me here. The Sandame and I were unsure if he'd even come out at all, though I have a feeling he won't pass up the opportunity. To what? Naruto wondered. Stir up another war? Get back at Konoha? Minato shot back, looking like he didn't quite understand it himself. Who knows? With guys like that, they'd do anything for revenge. Naruto found himself thinking of the mysterious Akatsuki leader. He was leading this city now, and for what? Who was he? A man just like Watanabe, selfishly manipulating the city for his own goals? For revenge as well? So do we have a plan? Not much of one. Minato sighed. My team and I will do what we came here for, and you'll be here for backup, if we need it. The Yondaime stood then, turning to the window. Rain splattered in long waves of water, wind rattling at the glass. To think, Every day was like this in a megacure, an endless torrent of rain. Naruto caught sight of the man's reflection in the glass, suddenly struck by how identical it looked to the Yandame's portrait in Hokage Tower. The sternness to his brow, a seriousness that Naruto rarely saw. To think, how different this country is now. The Hokage-to-be shook his head. How could it have changed so easily? The time traveler thought to the coup that could have done the same to Konoha, to the elusive leader of Akatsuki who had managed to do it to a mega-cure. I'm not sure. The blonde answered honestly. Maybe it's inevitable. Minato shook his head. Not while I'm Hokage, he whispered, though Naruto was under the impression it was more to himself. If only he'd stayed Hokage longer, then. The blonde leapt as if burned, reaching into his side pocket where he pulled out a seal. Naruto immediately recognized the design as an alert. The Yandame met his eyes, a look of frightened terror, before he pulled Naruto's arm, and the two of them were leaping through space. They hit the floor of Team Minato's hotel room, now looking like a spree of attack dogs had ravaged the room. The high ration always reminded him of time travel, a sheer vertigo of disequilibrium that made him feel dizzy. Minato's had been a fluent motion, like diving into water. The Yandame burst action, throwing open the bathroom door, to see the inside wrecked as well. Naruto checked the outside hallway, which seemed as battered as the door did, though this time, he found Obito, at least. The Uchiha was slumped against the wall, another nin laying crumpled at his feet. Though victorious, the black-haired boy looked worse for wear. Obito. Naruto murmured, propping the boy against him. Are you alright? NNN. The Chonin shook his head, looking out of sorts. I'm fine. But Kakashi. Rin-chan. What about Kakashi? And Rin-chan? Naruto asked slowly, meeting Minato's eyes as the furious Yandame came into the hallway. He looked back down at Obito. Where are they? Kakashi-uk. Obito clutched at his head, pushing off of Naruto. Kakashi was down that way. I dunno. He went out to get a soda, and then I heard him shouting I came out here but this guy came out of nowhere and then I. It's okay. Naruto assuaged calmly. It's gonna be okay. Naruto moved down the hallway quickly, leaving Minato to take care of his injured student. Kakashi seemed significantly less harmed than Obito, though at first glance it looked as if he had bled out all over the floor. He looked small and petulant amidst the sea of grape soda cans, from where the machine had been decked open by a long blade. Upon closer inspection the blood was actually cherry cola, from the cut-open cans where Kakashi's katana had wrecked through dozens of them. Naruto let out a sigh of relief. Are you okay, Kakashi? The boy grumbled in response. I'm stuck. His feet seemed to be completely encased in cement, which seemed to rise up out of the floor and gobble him up until his neck and head were the only thing visible. Naruto would have laughed at the irony, remembering the time when the copy nin had used a similar trick on Sasuke many years ago. Don't worry about that. The blonde easily dispelled the jutsu, Kakashi springing free and landing cat-like on his feet. Where's Rin? The Hitake looked up sharply. She was in the room. He answered, why died? Was she? Naruto immediately turned tail, sprinting back into the room, Kakashi hot on his heels. The door was still wide open, Minato standing forlornly in the middle of it, surrounded by seals. Naruto was immediately impressed by their caliber, scrawled all over the floor, the windows, and even the door. But the Yandame wasn't focused on any of those. He was looking up at the ceiling, a space devoid of black ink. The vent. Minato cursed quietly. The fucking vent. You wouldn't have known. Naruto placated, stepping inside. He ushered Kakashi into the bathroom to get cleaned up. Obito was lying face down on the bed. At any rate, no normal person would be able to fit into something so small. No normal person, Minato agreed. Just a ninja. Well. It's not your fault, sensei. Obito cried weakly, voice muffled by the pillow. It should have been me protecting her but I ran to Kakashi instead. Both of them needed your help. The Yandame assured the upset Uchiha. And it's going to be alright. Each of you have one of my special kunai for this purpose. So we'll be able to rescue her? Obito looked up, relieved. Thank God. Poor Rin-chan. She must be so worried. Or knocked out. Naruto thought, but decided would be better to keep that to himself. Get Kakashi. Minato ordered. And we'll decide what to do from there. As Obito scurried into the bathroom, the yondaime turned to Naruto. Watanabe? Naruto guessed. Looks like he didn't go after me after all. Minato smiled bitterly. But we've got our shot. Naruto pointed out, feeling a little sympathetic that it was at Rin's safety that they did. And you can pinpoint her location? Minato nodded. As long as the kunai is still there. The bathroom door swung open, hitting the wall with a swooping bang. We want to go too, sensei. Obito shouted, though it looked as if his ears were ringing from his voice. We've got to save Rin-chan. You guys have done good. Minato said, shaking his head. Leave the rest up to Naruto and I, alright? Obito pouted, but Naruto felt odd satisfaction at the words. Naruto and I like they were partners. Or equals. But I want to help too. The Uchiha whined. Kakashi scowled, the little imp looking like he at least understood that they'd only be a hindrance. Come on, idiot. The younger Chunin scowled. Leave it up to sensei. We'll only get in the way. But. Obito sputtered. But Rin-chan. We'll be fine. Kakashi cut off, looking irritated. Minato-sensei can handle it. Obito looked up imploringly at Naruto and Minato, though the latter only sighed. Just rest, Obito. Fine. The Uchiha muttered glumly. Minato turned to Naruto, taking Obito's sullen understanding as approval. Shall we? Naruto nodded. Looks like they were smart after all. Minato sighed, looking annoyed. He picked up his kunai from where it was laying on the ground, along with Rin's Hitai-8 and the majority of her weapons. There's no sign of struggle. Naruto noted, walking around the scene with a keen eye. She's most likely unconscious. That might be better. Minato muttered grimly. They won't start interrogation until she wakes up. At the thought of anything torture-related with Rin, the man's face twisted into a controlled impassiveness, though Naruto was aware that that was even worse than anger. They'll keep her as a hostage, most likely. Naruto pointed out. He looked down the street, the rain having melted into a light drizzle, but the mist still thick and laden against the ground. He caught sight of one of the street posts. Hako. There's a base around here? The blonde spoke up, eyes widening. He remembered the name vaguely from his maps he'd received in his mission scroll. They were composed from spy groups meticulously monitoring Amigakure. Though there was little evidence, Watanabe and the few Hanzo loyalists still left were said to have a base around the area. Minato looked up sharply, Rin's Hitai-8 still in his hand. Do you know where? The blonde asked furtively. Naruto shook his head. No. He said, apologetically. If only he hadn't left his maps in his room. But it can't be too far. We'll split up then. Minato answered immediately. The blonde tossed another three-pronged kunai his way. If you discover anything, just scratch the seal. It'll alert me. Naruto nodded as Minato disappeared with nothing but a quick, blurred movement, leaving the Jounin to take the other side of the street. Though it seemed a futile gesture, as Naruto could see little else aside from the watery street, diffused in the speckled lighting of lined street lamps. Amigakure was unpleasantly silent without the constant shifting background of rain, almost eerily quiet as the blonde made his way down the street. Surely they'd have guards up, or perhaps just people wandering the streets as slum rats. But the entire block was devoid of life, making the ninja stand on edge. It was unnatural. Impossible, even. Naruto blinked then. Kai. How could he always be this dense with genjutsu? The street blurred, before breaking into a road of messy, broken bodies. Naruto immediately leapt for cover, ducking behind a building. He peered into the street, which now carried with it the faint sounds of people farther away, and the electric hum beneath his feet foreshadowing a powerful generator somewhere near here. The blonde gulped, eyeing the strewn corpses. His identity wouldn't be safe here, certainly. But, for the life of him, he couldn't make a henge. Then he smiled. But of course, there was another option. After a few quick hand seals, he turned into a she. He had no time for satisfaction, however, as a blade was poised at his neck. A young girl like yourself shouldn't be wandering alone. Naruto smirked. Sexy no jutsu could really come in handy sometimes. Who said I was a little girl? He ducked under the blade, giving a sweeping kick to the man behind him. The other ninja sprawled, but quickly poofed into a rock. The blonde parried a few more strikes, unpleasantly surprised at how unmatched he was. This man was strong. Perhaps even stronger than Minato. Naruto dodged a punch to the face, only to be quickly overwhelmed by a kick to the stomach, effectively pinning him to the wall. He grimaced. Who are you? Naruto looked up to see a cloaked figure, a few ways taller than him in the sexy jutsu and probably when he was normal, too, with a multitude of piercings up the bridge of his nose. He had unusually red hair, as well as very tan skin. But it was the eyes that bothered Naruto the most. He'd never seen the pale gray coloring, nor the thousands of rings that seemed to focus in on his pupils. Nen Naruto grunted. Ja. From? The man asked, looking amused. Naruto swallowed. Amiga cure. There was a moment in which the man only watched him curiously, and the blonde thought he was in the clear. That was, until a kunai was embedded next to his head. Try again. Konoha. Naruto grunted. The man's eyes narrowed. Konoha cure? Why? A mission. The blonde heaved slowly, carefully looking for a way out. He was unmatched, clearly, and Naruto would prefer not to have to use the Kyuubi, as that would give away, well, everything. For what? Asked the taller man, testily. Assassination. Naruto gave a shuddering breath as the pressure to his stomach was lifted. Of Watanabe Akio. It seems that had been the right answer, as the man backed off, leaving Naruto to slump onto the wall. Huh. Muttered the man, looking a strange mixture of irritated and amused. So Konoha has gotten itself involved. But for what gain? Naruto took the opportunity, as the man was lost in thought, to slowly draw his hand into his pocket, reaching for Minato's kunai. If he could just give it a scratch, even the tiniest one, surely the two of them could take this man out together. It shouldn't be too hard, after all, with their speed and the element of surprise. But the man's eyes flashed, and one hand was on Naruto's feminine wrist, near crushing it, and the other was grabbing the kunai for himself. Naruto blanched. The Yondame's seal, said the man, monotonously. Naruto paled, as he threw it into the far wall. It embedded with a thunk. He will not be helping you here. We have no need for that man. And me? Naruto asked bitterly, holding his ground. Ima with piercings eyed him casually. You may prove your usefulness. Decided upon. And a woman appeared in a flurry of paper flowers. Her eyes were dark, but her hair was a bright, sky-like blue. The main entrance is clear. The woman began, her voice a careful blankness as well. He hasn't foreseen our involvement. Good. The man nodded, before turning to Naruto once more. You will aid us in our quest, Konoha Kanoichi, in order to atone for your country's sins. Sins? Naruto thought, puzzled, but certainly wasn't about to question. Fine. Naruto bit out, pulling himself from the wall and attempting to tie up his long hair. It was nice when going for the whole sexy thing, but an annoyance when he was actually trying to get work done. No introductions or anything. The blonde muttered. But the man caught it. You may call me Uten for now, he said enigmatically. This is Konan. The woman inclined her head. Naruto scowled. But I don't understand. Why are the two of you helping me? The woman, Konan, snorted. We have our own motivations, answered Pen, with an air of mystery. So it seemed that there was more going on in Amigakure than Naruto had first thought. You must be with the girl, then? Pen glanced at Naruto. Naruto blinked. The one they dragged in earlier. His eyes widened. You mean Rin-chan? Konan. Konan cut her off with a hiss, waving her hand and looking down the street. Naruto closed his mouth, sheepishly. Was it a girl with brown hair? He asked, quieter. Konan nodded. She was unconscious. As he had thought. It seems Watanabe is intending to lure the Yondaime. Murmured. But to what end? Revenge? Naruto hazarded, quoting from before. His eyes glanced longingly to the kunai on the far side of the street. If only Minato would hurry up and realize he'd went in the wrong direction. A possibility. Konan agreed. And shook his head. But too obvious. Perhaps he'd use the man as a bargaining chip in order to force Konoha's hand into aiding the Hanzo loyalist cause. Danzo would never fall for that. Konan pointed out, losing Naruto completely. Danzo? Regardless, Pin waved her off. The ploy has given us the perfect opportunity to rid Amigakure of those opposing its peace. We should make haste of it while we can. Konan nodded. I'll take the roof, she declared, before disappearing once more into a flurry of origami cranes. Pin glanced at Naruto, still some ways shorter than him, now looking at least like a semi-effective ninja with his hair tied up. You will accompany me to find Watanabe, he intoned deeply. It would be in both of our best interests to work together, at least for this juncture. All right. Naruto agreed, if not a tad cautiously. Who knew who the hell these people were? Underground Amigakure revolutionists. Amigakure? Though they wore no high-tie. The two entered the main premises quietly, and, true to Konan's word, the main guard and entire first floor had already been killed for them. Pin maneuvered himself around them easily, moving to the stairs, Naruto hot on his heels. His eyes were eerily bright in the dim fluorescent lighting, and Naruto couldn't help but be drawn to them. The salient, puissant glowing of them. The second floor opened to an array of surprised ninja, who were almost immediately blindsided when gravity seemed to pull them closer to the man close enough for him to skewer them easily with his weapons. Though Naruto couldn't blame them, he was surprised too. He'd never seen anything like that, nothing so powerful. The blonde followed a little reluctantly, more worried now than before. Whoever this man was, he wasn't anyone to be trifled with. The strange Dojutsu. The odd technique Naruto swallowed, and decided that some things should stay in the past. This would be one of them. He warily kept his distance from the other man, contemplating how he was supposed to send a message to Minato. He'd found the hideout, that was for sure. Though in present company, he doubted he'd be able to do little else aside from follow and wait for a moment in the man's spectacular defense. It seemed that he kept one eye on their enemies, and one eye on Naruto. By the fifth floor, Naruto was feeling a little useless, though he was privately pleased by this fact, as using any unique attacks may give him away and coming up empty-handed on how to get in touch with Minato. Every time his hands so much as twitched and his eyes moved to him, those strange rings glancing at him quickly, before he easily disarmed their opponents. How many more floors? Naruto asked by the seventh, getting a little exhausted. Being tense for this long really wasn't good for his muscles. It felt like every second he was waiting for Pin to turn to him and spring into action, preparing himself for it, for what he'd show the other man if it came to that, he'd have to kill him. For if never lived to tell the tale. The man gave him a sidelong glance. A few more, was his answer. Watanabe's office on the top floor. Great, the blonde thought, rankled. Like that won't take long. It would be so much easier if his accomplice at least used Kage Bunshin to clear the many rows of protecting guards. Or at least a summon or something. Lord knows there was a faster way to do this, that's it. Summon. Naruto's eyes widened, only to drop back down. But how would he manage that, with Pin watching his every move? Though Pin hadn't been the only one watching. That move, whatever it was, that distorted gravity, it could only work for a few seconds. And afterwards, Pin was left vulnerable. Or at least as vulnerable as a man like that could be. At least, he seemed weaker, like he was recharging his attack. Naruto drew in a bated breath, waiting for Pin's latest attack to wane off. Once it did, and the entire hallway was clear of guards, he sprung, ready for his attack. But someone beat him to it. Naruto. Rin came stumbling out from the opposite end of the hallway, rounding the corner with a limp and looking utterly exhausted. She'd already spotted him, and was looking relieved. Naruto was just plain surprised. Rin? How could she tell it was him? He was a girl, after all. The blonde rushed to the young chonin, completely oblivious to Pin's narrowed, surprised glance at the mention his name. Naruto. The girl mumbled, almost dropping to the floor. Naruto slid to catch her in time, eyeing the hallway she'd just come from. His eyes widened when he realized she must have woken up and fought her way out, attempting to get out of the complex. In a flurry of paper, Konan was beside Pin on the opposite end. Naruto took his distraction to bite down on his thumb, blood oozing out of the wound as he rapidly made the hand seals for the Kuchios no Jutsu. "He's on the 9th floor, she explained, her voice calm even though she spoke quickly. "Heading downwards there seems to be some sort of escape into another complex of building on the 8th level. We'll intercept him, then." The two were distracted by another round of enemy nin coming down from the stairs. Taking the opportune moment for the fortuitous fortune it was, Naruto flew through the summoning hand seals, quickly tearing at his skin and pressing them as quietly as possible into the ground. A rather small, rounded toad the size of his palm puffed into existence, looking surprised and confused. "Who the hell are you SSH? Naruto hissed, leaning over to shove the toad, Rin, and himself bodily over the corner. "Keep your voice down. Who are you?" The toad repeated again, looking wary. "That doesn't matter," Naruto said, hastily. "Listen, I need you to give to who?" The toad blinked. Naruto wanted to hit something. Ask one of the other summons. He spat quickly. "Look, tell Minato that I've found Rin. We're in the building across from his kunai. Tell him, that okay?" "Okay," the toad whispered back, looking unsure. "But I'm not really a summon, you know. I'm still in training on Mount. I know who you are, Gamakaki." Naruto smiled, nostalgic at seeing his friend so young and small. "But you have to forget me, okay? Pretend like you never met me. Message to Minato." At this, the young Gamakaki was even more confused. "What?" But Naruto released all the chakra holding him, though, sending him back to the summoning realm in a cloud of smoke, just as Konan and Pin finished up the last of Watanabe's guards. He stood then, dragging himself around the corner, Rin on his slim, feminine shoulders. "Is she dead?" Konan asked, no inflection to her voice. Naruto shook her head. "Chakra exhaustion, I think. She'll be alright, then." The comely woman looked satisfied, turning to her partner. Pin nodded, and the three of them ascended the stairs to the 8th floor, Naruto making sure to stay a few paces behind the two, always behind. It wasn't hard to find Watanabe. He was a rotund, obtuse man of short stature, and his waddle made the floor shake with grounded effort. Pin's long, languid strides easily dwarfed the man's smaller ones, cornering him into a hallway as Konan's paper molded to seal the opening shut. "What do you want from me?" he cried, after fruitlessly pounding the papered wall. He turned around to them, and Naruto was sorely reminded of Gato, the way his forehead gathered sweat profusely and how his soft stomach collapsed as Pin pushed a kunai into it. "I want nothing." Those eyes collected light from the moon in the windows, a strange, warped sort of purple. "But to see you suffer. Like a stuck pig," the man squealed, yelling aloud. "I never did anything wrong. I was just helping, you know? Just trying to survive. Just like everyone else. You will never know of survival." Pin spat, the most emotion in his voice Naruto had heard since meeting him, as if the other man had struck a resounding chord of hunger. He threw the man effortlessly into the wall, ending his pathetic life with a gravitational force to crush all his bones. Watanabe's body slumped to the floor in front of Konan, the woman walking over impassively to stand over the now dead corpse. Pin turned to him. "Does this man look familiar to you?" Pin gestured to the bloodied man leaning against the wall, head lolled and eyes closed. Even if he did look familiar, Naruto wouldn't be able to tell with all the swelling and blood, all the skeletal bone structure mangled. He blinked. Does he?" Pin asked again, deceptively calm. "Did he? Had he ever been in Konoha? Would he have been, in this timeline?" Naruto couldn't think straight, couldn't remember. "I don't know," he answered, lamely. Pin sighed. "It seems you had no use after all." The man with the strange eyes took one step, pulling his hood off to reveal his face in the full lighting of the wintry moon. He looked younger than Naruto would have imagined, the piercings lining his nose glittered in the pallid lighting, a youthfulness to his full face that Naruto hadn't expected. Before he could use that freaky gravity jutsu on him, too, the entire line of windows shattered, a lightning-fast blonde ninja barreling through them, causing Tien and Konan to retreat in the process. By the time the glass had settled, a mere matter of seconds, the yondaime had been pinned with a kunai to his neck, the other man looking surprised to see the blonde. Minato, the yondaime, looked up then, tearing his gaze away from Tien to see Naruto and Rin in the bloodied hall. For a moment, Minato didn't seem to recognize him in his sexy no jutsu form, before his eyes widened and he turned back to Tien. "Well played, little girl," Tien surmised dryly, though he didn't look particularly judicious about it. Naruto smirked. "You underestimated me. We're at a stalemate, then," Tien supposed, calm in the quiet wrath of the yondaime Hokage holding a kunai to his neck. "What shall we do? Fight over who leaves this tower alive? Perhaps you were meant to take Watanabe with you. Have you been deceiving us all along, girl? Or was this your whole purpose, to lure us here to fight your precious yondaime? What's so special about you?" Naruto wanted to ask, though knew he couldn't. Minato pensively looked between the two of them. To Naruto, who looked ready, and almost itching for a fight, and to Rin, who was exhausted in the girl Naruto's arms. And back to the mysterious young man in the cloak, who couldn't be any older than him, smiling elusively up at him. "Do you have an answer? We'll leave," he decided, ferociously. "I'll take my team, you take yours, and we'll pretend like this never happened." Naruto sighed, tension leaving him. "Always the peacemaker." "Agreed." Nodded, the demure tone rivaled only by the smirk on his face. Minato narrowed his eyes at the man, never once breaking eye contact, even as he moved across the room to grab Rin and Naruto. The blonde accidentally caught Tien's eyes, the strange dojutsu spinning in them, calling out to him almost, before the Hiraishin took over him. The journey back to Konoha was quiet, and almost excruciatingly long. Long with both Obito and Kakashi injured, the trek was a long, grueling road that never seemed to end. Naruto could have cursed the musty heat, for the humidity seemed to trap it amongst the enormous trees, laying thick and clinging to his clothes. And quiet, for no one seemed up to talking. Minato kept eyeing him, and Naruto kept looking in the other direction. Rin was too exhausted to do much else aside from plod along sullenly behind them, and Obito too injured to keep blabbing. And Kakashi, well, Kakashi hardly spoke at all. It wasn't until the very end of their trip, when the air had finally crisped into a ripe coolness and the trees began to look marginally normal, with Konoha closer at every step, that Minato finally voiced what Naruto knew to be on his mind. "Naruto." Minato began slowly, carefully watching for any reaction with the other blonde. "Do you have toad summons?" Naruto paused in his steps. "Toads?" Minato eyed him. There was a moment in which Naruto said nothing at all, his face covered by lemon-colored hair. Minato waited for his answer with bated breath. Was it possible that Naruto had the same summon as him? But how? Only Jiraiya had the contract. Had Naruto encountered Jiraiya? Was he a student as well? But how was that possible? And then, Naruto laughed. "Toads?" he repeated, wiping at his eyes. "No. I summon frogs." Minato blinked. "Eh?" And then. But it was an amphibian. Naruto looked at him, amused. "Frogs are amphibians too, you know." This was true. The yondaime tried to think back on the summon he'd seen. It looked a lot like a toad. But wait. Didn't frogs look like toads too? It had been green after all. And a little slimy. But weren't toads like that too? What was the difference between them? His confusion must have shown on his face, for Naruto continued to laugh. Perhaps he'd been wrong after all. Minato followed Naruto with a keen eye, unsure if his incisiveness was only having him make hypothetical theories or actual conclusions. He hadn't gotten anything so far. Naruto was different. Though that was obvious to any observant shinobi. The blonde jounin was almost disturbingly intuitive, with a vast, almost omniscient knowledge that he seemed to keep a vigilant watch over. Though, Minato thought that if he just asked, he might get the answers he wanted. Might. Mostly, Naruto only followed Obito around good-naturedly, amused as the boy lead him around to various arcades, bookstores, local shops, and of course, the ramen stand. Naruto seemed to get along well with his team, even Kakashi to an extent, though the two of them seemed cordial at best. Minato didn't really mind. After all, it was good for his team to socialize, though that didn't stop him from carefully keeping an eye on the other blonde. For the Jounin was certainly stronger than he let on. Minato was certainly struggling to understand the blonde, though what he didn't know was that the blonde was struggling to understand himself. He inherently was aware that a large part of who he was came from his parents, genetics, and all. Minato was obviously his physical correlation, as the two of them could pass for twins if they wanted to. And Kushina, well, Kushina was the reason why a lot of people weren't too surprised he was such a stubborn, mulishly immature kid when he was younger. And that was really all he'd thought of his mom. She was really pretty, yeah, and really nice when she wanted to be, though mostly she just had a temper. There was something almost flat to their dynamic, a linear, straight accepted idea that this was his mother. She was fiery, and beautiful, and strong. But not like Minato. Minato was fiery, strong and real. Naruto understood him more as a person, rather than a figment of time fixated in a single, memory-like dream place. But Kushina was inadvertently going to change that. It was only pure, unadulterated luck or, perhaps in a way, misfortune that the two managed to meet while in line for coffee. And by then, it was only polite to stay and talk. Not that Naruto had any intentions of doing so, no, not when it was more awkward standing in her presence than he'd ever imagined it to be. This was his mother, but she was just a pleasant-looking woman with fiery, sea-blue eyes. Just a stranger. I heard you went on a mission with Minato-san. Ah, back to the formalities again. How was it? You don't have to pretend to me. Naruto waved her off with a wry grin. I know all about you too. More than you probably know yourself. Kushina blushed. Ah? Sorry, it's just habit now. And with a far-off look. It's not good for people to know about us, you know? His reputation and all that. His reputation? Naruto echoed, sipping his coffee and choking. Straight black. Ugh. The two had moved from decorous greetings in the coffee line to sitting at one of the tables in an inevitable socially acceptable dance that two reluctant acquaintances did when meeting awkwardly away from their usual circle of friends. Yeah. She leaned into her hand, propped on her elbow against the table, stirring her own chai tea morosely. You know, him being the yandame and all that. Yellow Flash, all those Iwa kids out to get him, blah, blah, blah. She rolled her eyes with a silly, exasperated smile, appearing so nonchalant that Naruto knew, from experience, that she was faking it. After all, he made that expression himself. But that's not really what bothers you, is it? Kushina stilled. No, it wasn't Minato's infamous reputation. It was hers. Though there were people few and far between who were aware of the nine-tailed demon fox in her stomach. And those were a dangerous group of people. Kushina blinked, pulling her head away from her hand. I know what you are. He spoke, demurely. At this, she violently moved away, jogging her elbow from the table and clutching one hand to the armrest of the chair. The wall of vague, courteous amiability shattered completely. What are you? He smiled, yieldingly. I am one too. Naruto wondered how time could allow this. One nine-tailed demon fox in Kushina, and one in Naruto. How did time allow any of this? He wondered belatedly. How was it even physically possible for him to be sitting here next to Kushina, staring into her watercolored eyes and watching the color drain out of her face? You mean The tension eased from her shoulders. A Jinchuriki? Yes. He nodded, still smiling. There are 9 of them, you know. Of course I know. She bristled, looking annoyed he thought her so dim. What pride? He snickered to himself. Definitely runs in the family. I just didn't think I'd meet any others, I guess. We're not exactly common, you know. More than you'd think. Naruto laughed. After all, every ninja had their own demons. just not physically sealed to their stomach. Does Minato know about you? Kushina asked hesitantly, probably the most decorous he'd seen of her. Naruto shook his head. No, she looked relieved. Then he added, but I'm going to tell him. She deflated. You should tell him too, you know. Naruto advised seriously. After all, when it came to sealing him, it'd be pretty messed up if Minato was completely unaware his wife was a Jinchuriki. I know. She blew at her bangs. I just ... every time I get around to it, something gets in the way. Or I get in the way. Sometimes I wake up and think, today I'll tell him. And then, I don't. I end up just putting it off again, like I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity that I know will never come. The one who knows is Sandaime-sama, and Mito-sensei, or she did, anyway. Kushina looked down. Before she died. Naruto nodded, unsure of what to say. He'd never had to deal with one of his closest friends dying, let alone a teacher. Not even Sasuke, who seemed to have drifted so far away from him, was still alive. Tangibly. I thought I was alone. She whispered. Well, you're definitely not alone. Said Naruto, seriously, before grinning. And anyway, you have Minato. You guys can have a big, happy family, don't you think? She smiled softly. Yeah. And then, with conviction. Yeah. A big family. Like 12 kids or something. Naruto blanched. That would hurt, wouldn't it? Who cares? Kushina laughed, and for someone so loudly offensive she had a perfect bell-like laugh. And a smile that split her face into wide, brimming happiness. His smile. I've always wanted a lot of kids. A ton of kids. Naruto watched her, this woman of happiness, wondering if his smile looked as forced as it felt. I'm sure you'll get it. He promised, with false sincerity. He felt a little bad, lying to Kushina like that. Mostly though, he just felt bad for himself, even though he didn't know why. After all, he had the most loving, wonderful parents in the world. They just hadn't been there when he needed them the most. Naruto was beginning to realize why people took his father so seriously, some even shaking at the thought of his mere memory. He certainly hadn't been made yondaime for no reason, as it seemed even subconsciously the man had picked up on Naruto's oddities, even when the blonde tried fervently to hide them. The summon thing seemed to be really grating on him, as if part of him wanted to believe Naruto, a boy who'd given him no reason to distrust him, and the other, more rational part knew it to be a farce. Maybe it was time for some truth between all his white lies. And the least he could do was warn the guy, right? This was what he was going to lose his life to. Which was why, as he put down his ramen and quietly thanked Tuki for the nice meal, he made his way to the training grounds. They weren't far, and Naruto found his thoughts wandering to the future. He'd expected Jiraiya to call him back now. They hadn't figured a way to fix the continuum issue, so every day he spent in the past was still a day not there in the future. It had been about 3 weeks or so, and while he was thoroughly enjoying his time here, every time he saw Team 7 he thought of the half-remembered dream of a red-colored bridge, a lazy sensei and a rival with a blackened soul, still existing somewhere in the lapse of time. Every time Rin smiled, Sakura did too, somewhere in his memories. He could go back there, if he wanted. One seal and he'd be there, leaning against that red bridge and looking into that watery sky. But it wouldn't be the same. He entered the clearing, full of three-pronged kunai sticking up out of the ground, the trees, and even a few training poles. A yellow blur was racing around them, throwing more and more kunai until the ground was so effectively skewered with them it seemed to be made of spikes. One came Naruto's way, and he caught it deftly. A few seconds later, and Konoha's yellow flash near barreled straight into him, teleporting to the kunai in Naruto's hand and rolling out of the way. Minato blinked up at him, disoriented. Up and at it already, huh? Naruto smiled. Minato rolled his eyes, getting up off the ground and dusting himself off. Seems you are too. Eh? Up and at it, eating ramen already. Minato grinned, pointing to his head. There's a noodle in your hair. What? He balked as he pulled it out. And Tuki had just stood there and waved back at him, letting him look like a fool. The guy probably thought it was funny, too. "I didn't expect to see you here," Minato exclaimed, still smiling. It fell slowly though, as he realized Naruto wasn't smiling back. No, Naruto was studying him with intense delphinium eyes, as if contemplating his chakra patterns, his strengths and his weaknesses and his very soul. Minato swallowed. Perhaps he'd passed, because Naruto's eyes trailed back to his own, the sky and the ocean clashing against each other, like infinity to infinity. "I want to fight you." Minato felt like the floor had dropped below him. And then, what? Naruto titled his head. "You don't want to?" "It's not that." Minato faltered. Though maybe it was. He'd never had an issue with some friendly sparring and camaraderie, but for some reason, he couldn't fathom the thought of fighting Naruto. As if it was some sort of inherent, cardinal sin. Well then come Monday, and then the grin was back, but it was fixed, vulture and smile, as if the blonde was avariciously picking him apart. "You did say you wanted me to teach you something," Naruto reminded. But he'd meant some sort of inconsequential, interesting little thing, not a fight. Like they were enemies. "All right then." He steadied himself. Why not? Why not indeed? Naruto was just as fast as him, if not faster. Minato found himself wondering why Naruto had been so subservient on that mission when he'd been under that strange-eyed man's power. Surely, he could have fought him tooth and nail, and won, even. Of course, Naruto had no intention of winning, or fighting at all. Each strike was parried effectively, and blades met, sprung apart, and met again. He bolted out of the fray, rolling on his feet and leaping for the higher advantage. Naruto joined him, the two flying into a taijutsu match that exceeded gravity for a moment, whirling punches and kicks, dodging and hit until the two descended back down. He nimbly blocked one of Naruto's kicks, using the velocity to drop onto one of the trees, Naruto doing the same. The blonde charged again, too fast for Minato to think of ninjutsu or genjutsu. The flurry of rapid taijutsu almost reminded him of speed fighting, so quick it was almost too much to keep up. He'd thought he'd finally gotten the jump on the blonde, parrying strikes in a gravity-defying knife fight, when Naruto acrobatically sprung away, giving Minato the briefest glimpse of inhuman-looking eyes before an unnatural red chakra seemed to seep out of him in puissant, burning waves. They met again, and Minato's eyes widened as he was met with not blue, but red irises on the blonde's face. A dojutsu? But then what was that red chakra? He didn't think much of it, continuing to fight tooth and nail for the advantage, getting as close as possible with such a short-ranged weapon. He didn't have any warning when the red chakra lashed out, swiping at his chest with a ferocity. The blonde Hokage recoiled, springing away to land some feet away from the other blonde, who was eyeing him with an apprehensive, if not determined look. "What was that?" he asked, voice strangled. His vest was wet with blood. Naruto had landed a hit with that chakra. "I'm teaching you," Naruto said, a little too amiable for Minato's liking. "Teaching me what?" the other blonde asked rhetorically, wiping at the blood drooling down his vest. The wound was relatively shallow, but still annoying. "Your blood limit." "It's not a blood limit," Naruto explained by not explaining, looking exasperated at him. Minato paused. "Then what is it?" "A demon." Shock colored the yandame's face, evident in the draining of his pallor, but he had no time for the words to truly set in, only a wave of panic as he quickly made to parry Naruto's quick strike. When he leapt this time, Minato made sure to give them more distance, keeping a furtive eye to the boiling red chakra, and the other to the blonde's lightning-quick strikes. There wasn't even a need for ninjutsu at this point, the fight ascending to a much higher caliber than any elemental technique could assist. This strange demonic chakra almost reminded Minato of the gates. It seemed that by accessing it Naruto was incredibly faster, more powerful than he'd been before. Minato was hard-pressed to use the high Rasen. After all, if Naruto was using an ace card he should be allowed the same luxury. But he wasn't sure if it would exactly help. The extra speed, perhaps. But it wouldn't show him how to defeat this new level. "We can stop now," Naruto said quietly, And it was then that Minato noticed he looked almost lost. The Hokage dropped his guard, but not without caution. What is? But then the red chakra receded. He amended. That? It's demonic chakra. The blonde began, cheerfully conversational. He sat himself down on the ground, motioning for Minato to follow. As you probably know by now, I'm a Jinchuriki. Minato blinked at him, blankly, following with great reluctance. What? Naruto frowns. This was going to be a long conversation. Naruto paused, wondering how to word this. Well, I'm human, but I house a demon. Does that make sense? He thought on it, for a moment, the very mind-blowing idea of it. Yes. Minato stopped. But it doesn't seem possible. It's very possible. Naruto nodded, smiling as Minato carefully sat in front of him. And happens all the time. The blonde was looking at him unsurely. I'm sure you've heard of the nine-tailed demons. The myth? Minato scrunched his brows. About the moon and the first ninja that won. Naruto interrupted, waving the rest off. Most of it is considered just myth, but those tailed demons are real. They're entities of chakra. It was said that the first Hokage used his Makotan Jutsu to seal these beasts and give them to other nations as peace treaties. That much is true. Ever since then, it's normal for Jinchuriki to be part of the Kage's family. And at Minato's blank gaze, he shrugged. It's a sign of trust. Wait. The blonde halted. I get that they're real. And that you quite obviously have one. But you're not a Sarutobi. Are you? No. But you're Konoha Shinobi. So where? But where did I come from? Naruto smiled enigmatically. Minato mouth opened. Oh. So Naruto had been Ashigakura's Jinchuriki? And then his curiosity got the better of him. Which one do you? It doesn't matter. Naruto smiled, cutting him off. Minato hated to see it, that hurting half smile, as if Naruto thought he couldn't see right through it. And Konoha? Minato tried in vain to keep the nagging curiosity out of his voice. Does Konoha have one too? And again, that evasive smile. I'm sure it does. How vague. But anyway. Naruto got up then, stretching out his back. That was a good match, huh? I hope I taught you something interesting. You did. Minato answered, honestly, and this time, the returning grin was honest and true. And it made Minato all the more pleased to see it. Yeah? Good to know. Naruto chuckled. We should do this every week. I wouldn't mind, said the yondaime, seriously. Naruto blinked at him, as if surprised that his offhanded comment was being met with such stunning austereness. The blonde trailed off, taken aback. Well, sure then. Why not? Minato smiled. Naruto wasn't his student and he wasn't Naruto's. And somehow, that made it all the better. To think, here was this boy who'd been here this whole time, overflowing with such vast, omnipotent knowledge. How had they not met before that fateful spring morning in Iwagakure? Where had Naruto been his whole life? That reticent, taciturn look to Naruto's face didn't suit him, Sakura thought, but there was little she could do about it. After all, how could she help him when he refused to help himself? Refused to let her help. The young chonin could have punched the wall in her frustration. There was little else she had feared more than anything, and that was helplessness. Uselessness. And that was all she could feel right now. Where have you been? It was hard to not sound accusing. Naruto's turning into the dazzling, bright gold of the sun, turning and walking away from her. Showing up out of the ether 3 weeks later, an unreadable, somber expression to his face that she didn't appreciate. Naruto was her rock, an unmovable, indomitable cornerstone which assured her of complacency, assured her that Naruto was Naruto, and that no matter how far he went or how long he left, he would come back. And he had come back. But not in the sense of the word. As if part of him had wandered off, wandered into the distance where she couldn't follow, somewhere unreachable, and left a disoriented, metaphysical man in its wake. This was Naruto. Sort of. It was telling how his eyes moved towards the window, to birds flying like black silhouettes in the sky, Freedom. Somewhere, out there. But where? A mission. He decided upon, tasting the words like he did his takoyaki, as if decided whether they would satisfy her. In a class. Tsunade wanted me on a solo Tsunade? Sakura's eyes narrowed. Reluctantly, Naruto met them, as if realizing he'd been caught. You never call her Tsunade. No, just old woman, old hag, old bat. But Sakura could admit defeat when it stared her in the face. Naruto had his own troubles, his own issues, and she knew, though she may not want to admit it, that he could and would solve them on his own. He wasn't pushing her away. He was giving himself space. And though she truly would rather drop-kick him in the face and physically wrench the answers out of his throat, if there was one thing Sakura had gained after the event of Team 7's breaking, it was patience. You're safe though, right? She whispered, beside herself. And okay? Truly? He nodded. I'm okay. And then, with a smile. I'm here, Sakura. But you're not. How is it? She asked airily, and made a vague motion with her hand. There. Wherever there is. Can you tell me that, at least? Is it cold? Do you eat enough? You're taking care of yourself, right? Of course I am. He chirruped, like a brief memory of himself. But Naruto hadn't been carefree in a long time. Since he had come back from the Valley of the End, he'd mitigated from a rash, worryless little kid to a determined, driven young man. And though he'd never really lost his sunny disposition, he lost that naivety, that guileless mulishness that used to define him. I always take care of myself, Sakura-chan. It's a little cold there right now, but it'll be warmer soon. I'm fed, yes. I have ramen every day, more so than I should, anyway. I've got a place to stay and everything. This was just as much a part of Naruto as the loud brat who used to obnoxiously pester her for ramen. And as a smile cracked at his face, she knew the worst was to come. I'm really happy there. Those were the words she didn't want to hear. Kakashi thinks you're depressed. The blonde snorted. Yeah? Kakashi also thinks Jiraiya isn't a pervert. His opinion doesn't count. How odd, to see Naruto without his usual, visceral temerity. There was no impulsiveness to his lingering gaze, to his easy, wanderer's gait and the slow arch of his shoulders. The summer heat made the air hot and sticky, carpeted like a thick drapery of sweat and smelling like corn and farmlands. How Naruto managed to walk himself all the way out here, till the very edges of Konoha where nothing but sprawling farms held to the ground, Shikamaru would never know. It was just him, the blonde, and this dirt path that seemed to wind all the way into the setting sun. Shikamaru groaned, rubbing at the back of his head. Sakura's been harping on me too. She says we hang out a lot, so I should know things. But this was a clear overstatement. Because, though Shikamaru and Naruto were close, they certainly didn't hang out a lot. That was to say, if Naruto hung out with anyone. The blonde had been mysteriously absent as of late, something which Shikamaru had keenly taken notice of. The blue of his eyes slid to the lazy jounin beside him. And? I told her it was too troublesome. Naruto snickered, shaking his head. Everything's too troublesome for you, isn't it? Well, a lot of things. Shikamaru shrugged, plodding beside the blonde sullenly. You, for one. Naruto smiled, a wrangled, warped mirror of its younger version. I feel like I've been doing that a lot to people lately. Being troublesome. Naruto nodded. Don't take it personally, said Shikamaru wryly. Pretty much everyone's troublesome. The blonde snickered. It then. Shikamaru let the conversation die down, wondering if it was really worth it to take the effort to pry into Naruto's secrets. They were his own, undoubtedly, and Shikamaru really didn't have a need, or any sort of burning curiosity to pick the blonde apart. He'd always been a bit of a study in progress, and Shikamaru had learned to just let him unfurl as he would without prior prediction. The brunette sighed, before taking a breath. Naruto. He began slowly. All these people being more annoying than usual. Wouldn't have anything to do with your mission, would it? And the blonde closed, not in any physical way, just a brief flutter of his closed eyes. Is this an interrogation? And the blonde closed, not in any physical way, just a brief flutter of his closed eyes. Is this an interrogation? It depends. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Naruto's eyes opened, and he idly scuffed dirt with his shoes. Yes and no, said the blonde eventually, a certain voraciousness to his defeated voice. Sakura's just overreacting a bit. I think she expects me to defect from the village or something, but then again, she expects that out of everyone nowadays. And is it true? No. Naruto scoffed, scowling with irritation. Of course not. She's really worried. The brunette pointed out. And I know that she worries in general, but this is different. Sakura thinks I want to be on the mission more than I want to be home. And then, with a prolonged, exasperated look to Shikamaru's questioning gaze. Which I admit, might be a little true. So it's one of those alias missions? Something like that, yeah. Naruto didn't have the heart to tell him it was so much more than that. And he had a feeling Shikamaru didn't want to hear it anyways. Fortunately, the man was too lazy for his own good. Shikamaru sighed, looking up at a cloud with a digestive, if not lazy expression to his face. How troublesome. Naruto watched the same cloud. It's not just Sakura. Shikamaru revealed, blowing out a breath and giving a pointed look to Naruto. It's Kakashi, Hokage-sama, that dumb moron Kiba. Somehow even between laps he has managed to notice. Naruto blanched. To think, all he had to do to get some attention around here was disappear for a few weeks. Talking makes you feel better. Shikamaru advised lightly. Hell no. And Naruto shot him down in flames. The lazy Nara looked like he was going to attempt round 2, but luckily for Naruto the two were interrupted as a chonin whirled into existence from a cloud of smoke. He stepped out of the dissipating clouds, scroll held out in his hands. Uzumaki. For a moment, Naruto looked around for Kushina, before realizing that the chonin was here for him. For me? Naruto said by way of greeting. The man probably a new chonin, as Naruto didn't recognize him, though his face looked vaguely familiar, as if the blonde had seen him some years below him at the academy. Nodded, giving the scroll to Naruto. It's from Hokage-sama. She wants, but Naruto didn't wait for his explanation. It was easier to just see the hag in person. Tsunade was halfway into her third stack of paperwork, and was feeling rather good about it. Of course, she was failing to remember the large towering stacks around her desk, but at this point, it didn't seem like she ever cared to remember them. She sometimes wondered how the hell that flaxen-haired brat had roped her into this job, but all she had to do was remember his smiling sheepish face as he finished the Rasengan, complaining about how he'd never get strong enough to be Hokage at this rate. All she had to do was remember his laugh. There was a slight remnant to that exact face in the man in front of her, a little around the rounded, scarred cheeks. Most of it had been swallowed wholly by the shadow of Minato though, who lingered over every inch of the tan blonde like a venerable cloak. Naruto. She greeted, pleasantly enough. Naruto smiled back. Hey, Oba-chan. Ga. How are you? What's the scroll for? Tsunade shrugged. Formalities? Half of her had expected that chonin to come back a few hours later, apologetically explaining that he hadn't been able to find the blonde anywhere. She hadn't wanted to send a hawk in fear of the same, only in a shorter period of time. And then, Jiraiya's informed me of your mission. It's not much of a mission. Naruto shrugged. I'm just observing time periods and not getting paid. He added pointedly. This could be considered more of volunteer work, considering there was no hefty check at the end. He's worried for you. Is that how this all started? Naruto rolled his eyes, exasperated. Typical. There was nothing faster than the Konoha grapevine. He didn't say as much, but I figured. She smirked, dryly. He's been unusually prudish lately. I haven't had any complaints from the local public baths. That is unusual. Naruto snorted, though wasn't nearly as surprised as he made it out to be. He could still recall Jiraiya's face, a somber mixture of resigned besetement and solicitude. I can call him, if you want. She began unsurely, eyes watching Naruto. If it helps, I can. No. Said the blonde, more hurriedly than he'd meant to. That's not necessary. Tsunade raised a brow at such an illicit reaction. For a moment there, though she may have just imagined it, She was sure there had been a brief flicker of fear rising in the blonde's eyes. Did that idiot do something again? Or she eyed him carefully, appraising him with a narrowed gaze. Was it guilt festering beneath the surface? She debated calling him out on it, before leaning back in her chair with a heaved sigh. If you say so. Naruto nodded, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He's leaving us, Shikamaru. The Naru wondered how Sakura found him, then recalled that this was his usual haunt, and generally everyone came round at least once to talk to him. And by everyone he meant that loudmouth Kiba, appraising the voluptuous women, or what he assumed were because Kiba wasn't exactly the best judging females as they passed. Occasionally Chuji, who nursed his chips more than his beer. Ino sometimes as well, though that was really just to use him as a ploy to pick up other guys. Even Lee, once or twice, unsurprisingly ordering a soda before chatting up the lazy Jounon the entire night. That was nightmare. So he wasn't entirely surprised that Sakura knew where he was, as she was ultimately the smartest of their bunch. Well, would have been, if not for him. But usually he didn't count, as mostly he did little else aside from sleep. He's not leaving. Shikamaru sighed, already knowing who she was referring to. It seemed to be the same person everyone was referring to. Naruto always did know how to stir up the Konoha gossip into a wild, brewing rage. Sakura looked like she thought the exact opposite. He's not that dumb. Though invariably, Naruto did have his rather dim moments. Do you think he'd actually betray the village? Of course not. Snapped Sakura, looking offended. And then, deflating, sorry. I've just been on edge lately. It's alright. He shrugged. For a moment, Shikamaru hoped she may just leave it at that. But Shikamaru. She began again, unsteadily, crushing his dreams. You saw him. He's not happy here. Shikamaru finished for her, resigning himself to another night of silent, insightful contemplation ruined. I know. She looked down, sullenly. What are we supposed to do? And then, what am I supposed to do? This isn't something you can just fix yourself, Sakura. Quite the opposite, actually. Obviously, it's Naruto's issue. If he decides to involve us, well, that's ultimately his decision as well. All we can do is stand by him and hope he resolves it himself. And if he doesn't? She refuted, voice rising. I mean, not that I don't trust him because I do, implicitly, but Naruto has a tendency to put the world on his shoulders. He always has to be the hero, and I know it's getting him into trouble now, but he just refuses to see it like that, refuses for anyone to help him. And don't you think you're meddling a bit? Shikamaru pointed out, quite used to meddlesome women, as they dominated his life. I know. She bit out, slamming a frustrated fist into the countertop. The bartender wasn't particularly pleased, as almost every glassware he had rattled as the entire place quaked. The background chatter ceased into a wary silence. Sakura looked around, a little guiltily. I know. She repeated, quietly. Oh no. She wasn't going to cry, was she? You're worried, I get it. Shikamaru blew a raspberry. You don't have to be. But what happens? She looked away. What happens if he doesn't want to stay here anymore? Logically? He's going to renounce his title as a Konoha shinobi so he doesn't get marked as a missing nin, probably resign all his duties and go back to wherever he's going. Though Shikamaru figured this was precisely what she didn't want to hear. And you're not concerned? Her voice was rising in pitch again. That he'll do that? That he'll leave? Yes, I'm concerned. Shikamaru rolled his eyes, wondering why all women were so needy. So needy and needing to be assured all the time. Maybe not all women though, he amended. After all, Temari would probably rather take a kunai to the foot than start whining. We're all concerned. Then don't tell me you haven't thought about it. Come up with ideas. She sat herself down on the stool. Do you have any idea where he's going? Any at all? Shikamaru gave pause. Of course he did. At some point in his life, he'd probably thought on everything. And recently, he'd also thought on Naruto, too. That knuckle-headed ninja. Always getting himself into some sort of trouble. It seemed to rise with stunning perniciousness as he grew. I have a few. He admitted, though from his sour face it looked like he'd rather not share. After all, they didn't even make much sense, even in his own head. After all, Naruto would know better than to mess with something as all-encompassing as time, right? Sasuke grunted, watching the small fly that buzzed around one of the dimly lit lamps. Kabuto pushed up his glasses with one hand, leaning casually against the rock wall. Him and Sasuke, although he wasn't Orochimaru's subordinate for no reason, he knew that members of Team Heavy were outside the door were inside a smaller mission room, with a large stretch table and some lamps. It was supposed to set the mood for something like an interrogation, but Sasuke was much too old to be fearing dreary caverns and craggy rocks. That's why said Uchiha leaned back casually in his chair, frowning into the darkness as he did so. Just a theory, of course. Kabuto smiled, leering. But it seems your Uzumaki Friar Eye is growing, very powerful. If anything, the scowl deepened. What the hell do you want with me then? There's no evidence of this, of course. We need you to watch Uzumaki closely. We don't know what exactly he's doing or how he's doing it. All we know is that he's extremely powerful and these chakra surges were caused by him. Can you do this? The man pushed up his glasses, eyes twinkling. A cold ferocity rose in those dark eyes at the implication. Of course. Smirking, Kabuto watched Sasuke leave the room. Orochimaru was right, it was so easy to use the Uchiha's pride against him. The boy was an easily manipulated fool. Minato frowned as he looked at the notes once again. As the Hokage-to-be, and counting down the weeks until such, he had easy access to the sections in the library that no one else could. But more importantly, he had access to the Great Hokage Library, filled with techniques no one could possibly even dream of. He was certain that after rummaging through it much to the Sandame's chagrin, the old man kept saying that he needed to be more careful with these books. He found the books he was looking for. Sadly, they were a bit vague on the topics he truly wanted more detail on. When he asked the Sandame in person, hoping that the venerable, wise old man may hold more answers than any fortuitous, obscure text could, he was met with a literal brick wall. The Sandame only mysteriously told him that he may need to look closer than he thought, which only confused the Yondaime to be even further. Was he talking of Naruto, then? That was, assuming that the Sandame was aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki. Something even Minato hadn't found out about until recently. Jinchuriki. He tasted the word, like such an ancient, worn word that recall almost sounded foreign. He'd heard it before, somewhere. Perhaps in some ambiguous myth lore he'd been told long ago, a circuitous reference he could no longer. There was a lot to Naruto he didn't know. And if there was that, Minato could admit to himself that he almost thought of the boy as his son, even though now he realized he knew virtually nothing about him. He could just never get away from the kid, huh? Naruto had disappeared again. General rule of thumb to Minato, it was that he didn't like not knowing things. Predictability made him at ease and Naruto seemed to be the exact opposite of, and his thoughts brought him, indirectly, once more to the blonde in question. Minato sighed. Obito was relentlessly pacing their meeting place, a red bridge near one of the training fields, but Naruto hadn't shown up in about a week. In fact, there were times when the boy just seemed to disappear off the face of the earth. Rin had tried to use this new tracking jutsu she learned, to trace Naruto's chakra trail to wherever he was. This was still when the two technically, Kakashi was kind of out of it, had thought he was hiding from them and this was some sort of game. So they traced the trail, Minato following their lead amusingly. But, suddenly the trail stopped. Just stopped. There was nothing in its wake but a little bit of charred grass and an ink brush. The three actually were puzzled, wondering if they had followed the wrong trail or something like that. Eventually, they had come to the conclusion that it was a clue that Naruto left for them. At this point, which was about the third day after Naruto's disappearance, Obito and Rin were both stumped on what these clues could mean. The charred grass had to mean fire or something, but what was with the ink brush? There was nothing to connect their evidence, and the two were ready to give up. By the fourth day, Obito had found another one of the clues. A piece of burned paper, not too far away from the end of the trail and tapered to a bush. They figured the wind had carried it away. But by the 5th day the two of them had sighed and went back to their lame D-rank missions. But Minato knew something different. The charred paper and grass meant that the paper and grass were together, and the ink brush was probably from painting the paper. For what, he didn't know. Maybe Naruto was trying calligraphy and got angry, and ended up burning the thing, as ludicrous as the whole idea sounded. Then again, it was entirely possible that he and his team were making such a serious event out of what could be only a trivial matter. It certainly wouldn't be the first time, considering Obito. Sensei. Sensei. He shook his head out of his musings, as Rin ran up to him. What's up, Rin-chan? The young brunette skidded to a halt in front of him, bangs flying out of her face as she beamed up at him. Naruto comes back. He blinked, eyes widening. So Naruto was finally back, huh? Rin took his hand and dragged him down the stairs, and as they burst out of the Hokage Tower she took off in the direction of downtown, and as they progressed further into the crowd, Minato realized they were going to a Kairaku ramen. Of course, he smiled ruefully, Naruto would return and eat ramen. They were so alike sometimes it scared him. True to his thinking, Obito and Naruto were currently slurping down their second ramen bowl at an alarming rate. He chuckled slightly. Where's Kakashi-kun? Sick. Obito answered breezily, between a large noodle. Rin nodded from beside him. He got caught with a bad cold yesterday. I guess his mask isn't really useful. Naruto chuckled. I think Kakashi uses his mask for different reasons. Minato looked down at him, stern face morphing into a grin with one look at the sunny blonde. Where have you been? Well, you see. Naruto rubbed at his head, setting his third bowl down. I was helping a nice girl with pink hair, and then I was talking to a pineapple for a bit. What a liar. Rin crowed, throwing a chopstick at his head. Naruto ducked. No consideration at all. He snorted, chortling. Why would I, when you're clearly making this all up? Rin puffed, looking annoyed. You're a terrible liar, Naruto. And the blonde smiled enigmatically. But I'm not lying. The girl rolled her eyes before laughing. She swiped more chopsticks and began to fling them good-naturedly at the blonde, Tuki voicing his protests as they ended up stuck into the side of the stall like kunai. Obito did as well, as Rin plucked his chopsticks right out of his mouth, crying out as he made a grab for them, only to duck as she flung a soy sauce bottle. This would mark the first time Naruto had ever been kicked out of a Kairaku, ever. Oddly, he wasn't too upset about it. But honestly, Naruto. Minato frowned, picking out a fishtail out of his hair. He gave a glance to the other blonde plodding next to him, half of his face and gown and vest splattered with paint. Where have you been? Around. Shrugged the blonde. And where have you been around for this entire week? Minato asked, eyes narrowed. He knew he was being a bit petulant, but he'd been searching for the other blonde for the better part of 5 days. It was almost strange how easily it seemed the blonde could take a literal swan dive off the face of the earth. And why did you leave us clues? Rin piped up. Naruto stopped suddenly. Clues? He asked, face losing pallor. Yeah. Like the paper, and the ink brushes. Obito piped up. Minato caught the look of sheer timorousness draining the blonde of color, wondering what had the blonde so on edge. Quite apparently, they hadn't been left for them to find. And, true to his intuition, they hadn't been frivolous matters, either. Ah, well. And then just as quickly he was smiling again, rubbing at his hair. Minato noticed he did that a lot. Hell, so did Minato. Well, my friend has been teaching me how to draw animals, but I got so sick of how terribly my drawings were that I just burned them. Eh? Well, a half-truth, anyway. Sai really did teach him how to draw, and it wasn't the first time he'd hurled a fireball at both the irritating Chonin and his own pathetic attempts. Minato only eyed him carefully, his gut warring with his logic. Of course it was something candidly meaningless. What else could it have been? And yet, in the back of his mind came the intuitive clarity honed from years on the field, that burning sensation that reminded him that something was amiss. So where did you go? Obito asked, breaking the Hokage out of his thoughts as he peered up at the other blonde. Go? Naruto echoed, puzzled. I didn't go anywhere. I've been in Konoha this whole time. But, Rin protested. The chakra signature, most shinobi can mask their chakra. Naruto reminded lightly, waving a finger at her. Rin blushed. That was true. Oh. Wait. Obito butted in. Then, why did you mask your chakra? Naruto blinked owlishly. Minato paused. This was true for once. Obito brought up a good point. If Naruto really wasn't up to nefarious purposes, what was he doing being so sneaky? Minato appraised the other blonde. Naruto had never really given any indication of being anything but a decorous, if not a little stubborn jounin. Was that a wrong impression? And then, the blonde pulled a face, laughing. I was spying on the bathhouse. Rin blinked, once. Twice. And then, you pervert. She smacked him upside the head, only to have it turn out to be a log. Naruto snickered as he reappeared next to Obito, the boy giving the older jounin some ecstatic back-clapping and a few enthusiastic yelps. Minato wondered why everyone around him was so perverted. First Jiraiya, now Naruto. Who would be next? Kakashi? Didn't strike you as a pervert, Naruto? He chuckled. Naruto only gave him a vulpine smirk. I learned from my sensei, said the blonde, seriously, even as his eyes twinkled. Your sensei must have been quite a pervert. The yondaime surmised, immediately thinking of Jiraiya. Seemed they shared that in common too. Yep. They both were, actually. Of course, Minato wasn't aware that they actually shared the same sensei. Rin gasped in horror. Oh no. Naruto-kun, please don't tell me they rubbed off on you. I was speaking in the hot springs, said the blonde flatly, rolling his eyes. What do you think? Obito began to throw himself in fits with laughter, wheezing and coughing as Rin gave a terrified cry, waving a finger at Naruto incomprehensibly. Minato let out a bark of laughter, and Naruto found himself turning sharply at the sound, never seen the Hokage come so undone, so carefree. He couldn't help it. He was smiling too. Geez. Obito groaned, throwing his plow down on the dirt. I hate farming. What do you think you're doing? Rin wiped sweat off of her brow. Get back to work. Right. Obito squeaked, hastily drawing himself up again. He was a bit afraid of Rin at times like these. Especially when she growled and snarled and was sticky and sweaty, but more importantly, pissed as hell. They were in charge of plowing an old farmer's field. The man himself was sick and couldn't do it himself. Kakashi was finally over that sickness of his, and was somewhere in the backdrop farther off from them. But Obito and Rin were working side by side, that was, until Obito had decided to throw a fit. Honestly. Rin groaned more to herself than anything. I can't believe we have another one of these crap missions. Obito moped. Well, you were the one who said that you didn't want any more. I didn't say that. Rin hissed at him. Moron. I said that we should wait little before taking on another tough mission. I didn't mean. She waved a hand over the large farmlands. This. Obito just sighed, adjusting his goggles with disdain as he noted the red angry marks they had made on his sweating forehead. It was way too hot to be in black. Actually, for mid-spring it was way too hot in general. Keep at it, kids. Minato waved from the somewhere. His position on a large metal bucket seemed comfortable. Shut up. Rin squawked at him, looking away quickly so she didn't have to see her sensei laughing at them. Naruto watched the two with interest. It was kind of mean of you to give them such a crappy mission, he noted with glee. Minato rolled his eyes. You would have done the same. Good point. That's it. Obito, despite Rin's blatant protests, threw his plow on the ground again and growled. Sensei. Minato squeaked. The Hokage-to-be wasn't entirely sure if Obito's mad rage was induced by him or the heat. Either way, it didn't bode a good future for the blonde-haired Hokage. Naruto seemed to be a willing spectator to the event, an amused smile curving around the corners of his lips. Minato wanted to wipe the smug look right off his face. One day, the blonde would get a genuine team of his own, and bear the brunt of their incessant needs. One day. We need training. The Uchiha groaned. As in now. As in like, flashy jutsu and cool moves and just, sensei please. I hate to agree with him. Rin called from a little ways off. But it's the truth. There was a moment of silence, as Naruto bowed his head in silent laughter. Obito howled in rage, Rin leaned against her plow, Minato gulped inconspicuously, and Kakashi continued onwards in his work. Was all the Namakes could manage. Please. It would have worked perfectly, if Minato could actually figure something that he could teach them. Well, water walking? No, already did. Tree walking? Definitely no, that was a while ago. Obito already knew the basics, and he didn't know what else he could teach them besides specialty moves, but even then, it wasn't like he had any moves that his students could learn. Rasengan? Wasn't that a bit of overkill for a training session? Oi, Obito. The boy looked up as Naruto called him. The blonde, who up until then had seemed perfectly content to lounge in the background, sauntered next to the Uchiha. The blonde grinned. Why don't you show me what you know? For a moment, Obito, uncomprehending, only stared curiously at the older ninja. And then, as he fully understood what Naruto was implying, cheered. Somewhere, between shuffled dirt and dead plants, Rin groaned. Watch out, 'cause this one's gonna hurt. Naruto grinned widely, acting more like his avid porn-reading sensei than he'd ever publicly admit and enjoying every moment of it. If the Uchiha noticed the blonde's light, jovial mood, he certainly didn't show it. In fact, he seemed a bit too preoccupied with his hand seals, a movement which was coming on slowly, but steadily. He still didn't notice, even as Naruto's grin grew more mischievous as their spar progressed. And further still, as recklessly charged at Naruto, in a stubbornness that may possibly be an error in only Uchiha. And then, his eyes widened. Eh? And finally, did he look up, surprised and with foreboding horror, to caught the leering smirk on Naruto's face. Kawarimi? 1,000 years of pain. Obito yelled as he was sent flying through the air. Minato fell clear of his upturned seat, howling with laughter and smacking the side of the bucket repeatedly, looking like he may just go into cardiac arrest. Rin had dropped her plow in horror, and Kakashi, well, miraculously Kakashi was absolutely unaware of the good use his future technique was made into, and was tediously tending to his plants. Though perhaps not, as someone made a loud choking noise in the background, and Naruto glanced over to see Kakashi twisting around to stare in incomprehensive wonder as Obito quite literally flew by the seat of his pants. That was totally wicked. Rin cried aloud, loud enough for all of them to hear, regardless of Obito's rather vocal moans of pain. In a typical Naruto fashion, the blonde only rubbed the back of his head, looking mostly humbled by Rin's obvious and quite rightly lionization of him. For a full 3 seconds Rin was completely sure that Naruto was the closest thing to a wise and fair god, as no one had yet to so righteously put Obito into his place as the blonde had easily done this side of the sun, when Obito sprang up with more vigor than usual, flying into his hand-sealing process all over again, behind the unsuspecting blonde. The brunette opened her mouth to warn the blonde, just as Obito opened his. Naruto watch Katen, Housenka no Jutsu. Surely the blonde must have realized they were coming, as the fireballs erupted from Obito's throat and seared the already moistened air around them into a fiery blaze, and he had already turned to watch them approach him, and seemed to do little, if anything else. And then, Rin realized that he really wasn't going to do anything else. Naruto. But the blonde only seemed to stare them down, before leaping entirely straight through them, as if they had been nothing but an illusion. Rin gaped, nimbly dodging the incoming fireballs as they crashed into the ground, her and Minato having the arduous task of getting around the attack that Naruto already effortlessly dodged. Well, actually, he hadn't dodged at all, which Rin was still trying to wrap her head around. She looked up as Obito chortled Inawa and laughter, having been tackled to the ground by the surprising blonde, quite clearly down for the count this time. Naruto was grinning down at him, looking quite literally like the cat who got the cream. After wiping away most of the flyaway and burnt hair from the impromptu workout she just got, Rin galloped over to them, beaming. How did you do that? Naruto got up, giving a hand to the startled Uchiha beneath him. Oh, I dunno, practice I guess. So cool. Obito practically leapt at him as he stood, hopping over the upturned dirt to do so. You've got to teach me that. He scratched his cheek, laughing sheepishly. Ah well. Maybe. But unfortunately for the Uchiha, his unnatural affinity to fire wasn't anything that could be taught. Yeah, so, he may have gotten me that time, may have? Rin butted in incredulously, grabbing for another piece of sushi. Alright, so he did. Obito amended, not even looking winded from his long monologue on his and Naruto's spar and event which really didn't need retelling, as it had happened a few hours ago, taking a sip of his drink as he did so. But I'll have you guys know that pretty soon it'll be me kicking his ass. I'm going to come with a technique that's not only better than his, it'll be the best ever. Even better than Sensei's Rasengan? Rin quipped. Thousands. Obito agreed, quite serious. Minato looked mostly amused at the blatant disregard for his ultimate technique, only fondly ruffling Obito's hair. He reached for the check before Naruto could even think to, catching the other blonde's smirk with a knowing eye as he moved it out of his read. This one's on me. Naruto looked reluctant, but held off. You're asking to go broke, said the other blonde, with a shrug. This is true. Rin nodded sagely. It's no secret that Obito can eat 10 times his body weight. 2 times. Obito narrowed his eyes. And that was only once. No, just 2 weeks ago when we went to grass you must have consumed at least 200 pounds of rice. That's not even physically possible. The two blondes only let them continue their bantering with an endearing air, the two of them almost seeming to grow used to the incessant arguing that seemed to inevitably follow when Rin and Obito were in the same room. For a brief second, Naruto thought of how cute of a couple the two could grow to be. The amusing, dear illusion shattered at the thought that neither of the two would ever live to see the day. But this is the past, Naruto reminded himself, with bitter hope. And that's the future. And, for now, neither of the two mattered, because for Naruto, right now, it wasn't either. It was simply the present. And then, with desolation, but not for long. Soon enough, Rin and Obito went their separate ways, Rin to her house and Obito back to the perpetual gloom of the Uchiha district, neither of the two seeming particularly enamored with the thought of returning home from their surprisingly fun day of D-rank missions. Naruto found himself in a sudden, abrupt silence with Minato, the quiet, warm summer night air devoid of continuous noise now that Rin and Obito left. That was a pretty cool trick, Minato revealed, as the two plodded along together. You think so? Naruto looked up thoughtfully, thinking of how inspired he'd been when the technique had been used on him after getting over all the pain. Of course. Yeah. How'd you come up with it? It's pretty inventive. At the apt description of the jutsu's ingenuity, Naruto laughed. It definitely is. But I didn't come up with it. And then, with no small amount of embarrassment, actually, the reason why I know it is because it was used on me at some point. An experience you won't ever forget, I'm sure. Minato chuckled. Not in this lifetime, no. Naruto agreed. All too soon he was once more standing at another crossroad, though in a more figurative sense. He'd been standing at one for quite a while as Minato was meant to head back to his home, and Naruto to his hotel, and the inevitable future that lay many years away. I'll see you tomorrow. Minato bid cheerily, already moving to the other side of the road. Minato, his breath caught in his throat, in a vicious struggle to erupt out of his mouth. Words wrangled at his tongue, wisdom too dangerous ready to leap from his tongue. For a moment, a startling, clear moment, he imagined himself pulling the blonde aside, this glorious man who would one day save Konoha, and possibly the world, who right now was only a slightly unsure man with a great destiny ahead of himself, and whispering the very tumultuous thoughts that plagued his mind, if only for the selfish notion to get them off of it. But then the moment passed, the significant widening of Minato's eyes and the easing off of Naruto's tension, and the blonde found himself back at the crossroad, Minato pausing curiously to hear what he had to say. But the blonde only shook his head, an enigmatic smile to his face. Never mind. And with that, Minato watched him walk off in the dark, cicadas loud in the night air. And didn't see him again in almost 2 years. I'm not late, am I? Tsunade looked up from the enormous scroll she seemed halfway into, and both Sai and Sakura looked back with paradoxically unanimous unimpressed faces. He chuckled nervously, sliding in place between his two teammates. "Back to what I was saying." Tsunade gave him a brutish glare, as if to point out that it was him who had cut her off in the first place. "We've noticed growing reports of Otagakure spies encroaching on Konoha territory. You're serious?" Naruto gaped, eyes widening. Again, he somehow managed to unintentionally cut the blonde Hokage off. "Yes, quite serious," she answered, dryly. "Also, Jiraiya has stopped writing porn, Kakashi left for the monastery, and I'm actually paying Shikamaru overtime." "Funny," snorted the blonde. Tsunade gave him a low, narrow glare. "This isn't good, Naruto. You don't have to tell me," argued the blonde, before turning to his teammates. "You think that was what Sasuke was after?" "Undoubtedly," answered Sakura. Sai gave a non-committal hum. "So our assumption was right after all. You don't have to say it so optimistically." Naruto frowned. "But they have no proof, right?" "Orochimaru doesn't need proof," replied Tsunade, looking quite sure of herself. Though most likely she could be, as aside from Jiraiya and the late Sandaime she probably knew the slimy bastard the best. If he even has an inkling of something he wants, invariably he'll go after it. So Naruto's in danger? Sakura's eyes widened, whipping quickly to study the blonde, who seemed ossified into stone. Inadvertently. Tsunade agreed. Most likely he won't go after it himself. It's still a danger. Sakura cut in, obviously fearing for Naruto's safety. Perhaps a little overly so. Naruto seemed oblivious to the conversation, staring pensively and a little fearfully into the lines of wood that made Tsuen's desk, as if they held the answers to his most complex questions. Naruto snapped out of his reverie as Sakura's voice ascended in decibel. "And it sounds even worse to me if we don't do anything at all. There's no point in retaliating for something that hasn't happened." Tsunade shot back, wisely, "Fortunately for us, there are many places for Naruto to hide which Orochimaru likely won't be able to follow." At this, his two teammates turned to him curiously. "Really?" Sakura deadpanned, eyes narrowing. Naruto swallowed. Tsunade waved her hand. "At any rate, that's up to Naruto's discretion. For now, I'd like you, Sai, to deliver this." She pulled a scroll off the massive heap of paperwork on her desk, to Anbu. "And then, whipping out another one, and you, Sakura, to bring this to the guards. We're not having another ambush by Otagakure anytime soon. Everyone's going to be alerted well in advance this time." The two nodded obediently, though Sakura looked like she'd rather drop-kick Naruto in the face and wrangle out all his secrets. Fortunately, she only turned smartly on her heel and walked out curtly, Sai at her heels. Tsunade turned to him. "You know what to do." He nodded, numbly. This was what he wanted. Right? So why did it sort of feel like he was running away? He was still musing on this when he landed in the past, so engrossed in his thoughts he found the first pine tree and jumped to the top, dropping onto the branch and staring sightlessly at the looming faces on Hokage Mountain, instead of immediately taking off for Minato and his team. He wasn't a quitter, and he never gave up. That was his ninja way. So why in the hell did it feel like he was? A strategic retreat isn't the same thing as giving up, he reminded himself, with a voice which sounded oddly like Kakashi-sensei. But he'd never been one for strategic retreats, or retreats at all, for that matter. If he ever fell into a situation where he should probably be hightailing it out of, normally he just summoned more Kage Bunshin and did whatever the fuck he could to win. Although, this wasn't some crazy battle. In fact, there wasn't a battle going on at all. This was waiting with uneasy trepidation for the moment to start, peering into the abyss of the future and wondering what lay in its depth. Quite honestly, it made him uneasy. He shook his head. There's no point on dwelling on it now. He reminded himself. I'm already here, and it was the hag who told me to do it. At this, his stomach gave an opportune grumble. May as well get some ramen while I'm at it. There was nothing like the smell of Ikiraku ramen when he was really hungry. It only took a matter of seconds before he was sliding into one of the stools, cracking open a pair of chopsticks, and spewing through a list of orders. Tuki looked incredibly bewildered with this, much to Naruto's amusement. How long had he been coming here doing this? You'd think the man would be used to it, even in Minato's time. Speaking of Minato, it was curious to see a Nikiraku without his presence, or at least, his future wife-to-be's. Turns out, Kushina was the real ramen lover in the family. She made Minato look like a passing connoisseur. And if not those two, then at least Obito. He was a close second to Kushina, though Naruto had a sinking suspicion he was quickly passing both Minato and Obito in that particular race. He was entertaining himself so much with the idea he hadn't even gotten a good look at the bewildered Tuki, a young, teenage boy with an apron a few sizes too big. In fact, he didn't even notice anything was amiss until he'd finished up his unnaturally large portion of ramen, paid the bill and was perusing languidly through the streets. He stretched, heaving great, contented yawn and peeled open his eyes only to be met face to face with the Hokage mountain, looming up in the distance. It wouldn't have been all that surprising, had Naruto not taken the opportune moment to really look at it. And count how many faces were on it. Hold on. His eyes widened, pausing mid-stretch. There's the Shodame, the Nidame, the Sandame. And then, with growing horror, where's the Yondame? Although Minato wasn't technically the Hokage yet, the moment the Sandame had revealed his intentions to give up his seat once Minato was ready for the job, which at this point, was rapidly approaching the village, had made quick work of carving out the latest head onto the mountain. They'd made such quick progress that by the time Naruto had even gotten to the past, Minato's face was almost half finished, and the last he'd taken the time to look, it was nearing completion. But now, it wasn't there. At all. Naruto numbly sat himself down on the street curb, feeling like his legs were about to give out. Calm down. He told himself, breathing in deeply and hoping like hell he wasn't about to hyperventilate. Calm the fuck down. He had to think through this rationally, which unfortunately, was never one of his strong suits. The seal must have fucked up. Was all he could think. It was the only logical answer. It must have fucked up somehow, but the question was, how? It couldn't have been through his time seals. If he'd fucked up on those, either it wouldn't have worked and he wouldn't have jumped through time, or he'd be dead right now because he'd managed to destroy himself in the process. Considering neither of those happened, it must have been a malfunction on his tracking seal. But if it was a problem with the tracking seal, then he would have been having problems this entire time. And unless the tracking seal had magically disappeared from Minato's time, then his eyes widened. It hadn't disappeared. It had been charred clean to ashes. He'd taken to keeping it in his Jounin vest, and wearing it around whenever he was in Minato's time. When it came to leave, he'd strip it off and hide it somewhere safe, and then put it on again whenever he returned. He hadn't even thought of the consequences of not dodging Obito's fire technique. Fire never hurt him anyway, and at the time seemed like good fun to give Obito a surprise like that. Now though, it was increasingly seeming like an awful idea. Because without that tracking seal there was no way back. The vivacity he had once assimilated with Konoha and its bright, sunlit streets seemed to have left the city completely, along with the timeline he could no longer find his way back to. Konoha seemed to have lost its vigor without them, cast in a dull, hazy gloom which Naruto had never experienced before in the village. Not even when the majority of the people feared or loathed him, had it ever seemed so bleak. He didn't want to go back, not to his own time, where all his mistakes seemed to linger in the strange attempt of a smile that sometimes graced Sakura's face when she thought he wasn't looking, not to Jiraiya and his narrowed, disapproving gaze, not to Kakashi and his aloof, older self. And yet, he didn't want to be here either. Tuki was just a teenage boy, not even 15 yet, running a shambled ramen stand with his father without a hint of recognition to his face. Everyone Naruto knew or cared about had yet to exist. The Second Shinobi War had turned Konoha into something of a ghost town, villagers quick to return to the safety of their homes at dark, huddled close together and murmuring quietly, nothing like the boisterous village Naruto had always known. Who would be alive now, though? Tsunade and Jiraiya had to be around here somewhere, but the idea of going to look for them didn't hold much weight. He tried to think how old they would be. Jiraiya would be in his 20s, so would Tsunade, and Orochimaru. Naruto wasn't sure how long he sat on the curb staring bleakly at nothing, probably blending quite aptly with the dull Konoha around him. He tried, and failed, to keep the images of Team 7 out of his mind, looping infinitely in his mind, every precious moment that ended so abruptly until he was forcefully snapped out of it. Excuse me. He jumped. Literally. He blinked, the dimness of his eyes slowly coming back to life as he looked down and a little to the left to see who was talking to him. His jaw dropped. A boy was peering up at him curiously from where he had seated himself next to Naruto, a ways shorter than him and looking somewhat bemused by the funny faces Naruto was making. It was like him when he was younger. Except the boy was a tad paler. In fact, he could use a little more sun judging from the smooth green color of his skin. It almost reminded him of the Uchiha pale that Sasuke had. But he was blonde like the sun and goldenrod and saffron flowers. Blonde like sun-kissed hair. And most importantly, blonde like him. With that soft color that was not a true golden, but not platinum. Flaxen almost, it was a shade paler than his own mop of sunshine that was on top of his head. But what caught his attention the most was "Are you okay?" The blue of his eyes. Like the stratosphere in the bright early morning, like a cloudless summer sky somewhere where everything was beautiful, this glowing blue that Naruto couldn't explain as anything else as just an absolute mirror of his own. Naruto slowly fished himself out of his thoughts. Fine. I guess you startled me a bit. Why? You've been sitting on the road for a really long time now. The boy pointed out. The owner of this shop asked me to kick you out. He turned around, suddenly noticing a rather angry-looking shopkeeper holding a broom rather menacingly from his stoop. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. That's true. The younger blonde who Naruto was very happy to say barely even came up to his waist. Take that, Jiraiya. There were people smaller than him, albeit the boy must have been 10. Blinked at him slowly, almost owlishly. Naruto found himself staring again. The beautiful autumn sky brought out the Prussian in both their eyes. Naruto knew he'd curse this question forever, but looking in their eyes he knew he had to. So what's your name, kid? The boy blinked quickly. It seemed he was caught off guard. I'm Namikaze Minato. What's your name? Naruto almost lost consciousness. He knew it. It may have been just a hunch that had launched with the identical eyes they shared, but for some reason, he knew it. He had just known it. This boy was Minato. About roughly 15 years younger than the one he had met before, but still, this boy was his father. His father, who was about the coolest man he had ever met in his life. Naruto, my name's Naruto. Cool. The boy brightened. Naruto grinned at him, but soon the sharpness of it faded into something softer, wistful, even, as he soaked in the last bit of Minato he'd ever get to see. He supposed he should be grateful, even, that he'd gotten a chance to see him at all. It wasn't so bad, even, the blonde consoled himself, staring down at Minato, the blonde grinning outrageously, smiling ear to ear. Oh wait. The boy blinked. Isn't that the swirly stuff in ramen? Naruto balked, but regained his composure quickly. Yeah. I guess it is. I'm named after a guy in a book though. A book? The boy blinked. Before he doubled over laughing. That's the stupidest thing I've heard. Naruto wanted to point out that Minato was the one who named him in the first place, but he refrained from doing so. What are you named after? Minato shrugged, his little shoulders almost looking bony under his shirt. I dunno. Never knew my parents. Naruto's eyes softened as he watched him. People always told Naruto that he really, well and truly took after his mother. He was loud and obnoxious and stubborn and loved drama, but perhaps that was only because you really had to know Minato to see how similar they were, and Minato wasn't quick to let people see that far into him. Looking at him now, though, the slump of his shoulders and his downcast eyes, all Naruto could see was himself. The helplessness he felt as a child, the sadness and the confusion. He was once again enthralled and intrigued by the same sea glass eyes they had. How could anyone say he took after his mother after looking at those eyes? Except now, those eyes were glazed over in sadness, hopelessness, and lost emotions twisted away with the fading of his memories. Naruto looked down at him empathetically. He never knew Minato didn't know his parents either. It almost made him feel bad that he ever hated the man for what he had done. He smiled, softly but genuinely. "Yeah, I know what you mean, I never knew mine either." "Really?" Minato blinked, looking up. Naruto nodded. "Yup. My mom and dad died saving the village. And subsequently, sealing a tailed beast inside me. That's really sad." The younger flaxen-haired boy sighed. "The world is sad." The boy kicked a pebble with his foot, watching the small gray-colored rock skid across the pavement, bouncing off the sidewalk and tumbling around until met the road. Somewhere in the distance, a man was bartering around for some paper fans. The street wasn't very long, or very crowded. Maybe not. Naruto grinned. "You know, I might not have known them, but I found people that I relate to like that. You know what I mean? You don't really need a family when you have really great friends." "Oh, I know what you mean." Minato brightened. "Hey, you wanna get some ramen?" The Uzumaki boy man technically could have fallen over in the sheer irony of this moment. "Yeah, sure." He let himself be dragged over to a Kairaku's. Once more the teenage Toki no longer present but a stern man instead. Minato seating himself comfortably onto one of the stools, Naruto following suit with significantly less vigor. He'd already ate his full, but there was no such thing as too much ramen, and the majority of the people he knew were convinced his stomach held a small pocket universe specifically for the consumption of ramen, so Naruto had no qualms with ordering again. "One miso ramen please," they both said in unison. They looked at each other, stunned, before Minato burst into laughter. "Why, you like miso ramen too?" Naruto, who is used to these odd flukes he had with his father to be, only laughed as well. "It's my favorite," he said, his good mood fading as he thought of a similar instance he'd had involving his father and their love of ramen flavors. Minato seemed to pick up on the undertone in his voice, and slowly stopped laughing. "So, where are you from, Naruto-san?" he asked, with such a tactful change of subject for a kid his age. Naruto suddenly remembered why they called him a genius. Naruto tapped his high-tie with his chopstick slightly, and Minato rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Right." He grinned. "Forgot about that. So what rank are you?" "Jounin, you?" He might as well not lie about it. He was sure there were enough jounin that it didn't matter anyways. "Genin." The boy grinned brightly. "I'm almost chonin. And since the exams are coming up in a week or two and Jiraiya-sensei is going to teach me some ultra-cool moves so I can win." "Jiraiya-sensei?" Naruto echoed. It had been a long time since he had called Jiraiya that. Minato nodded. "Yeah. He's my really cool sensei. He's kinda a pervert though, but," he leaned in closer with a harsh whisper, "they call him and his team Sannin. Isn't that cool? I wish my team had some cool nickname like that." He got up abruptly, pitching his voice low as he cried, "Team Minato, feared from the coast of Iwagakure to the far-flung regions of Kiri." Naruto chortled in laughter. "They don't actually say outlandish shit like that about the Sannin, do they?" If they did, he'd never heard it at least. "No." Minato pouted, before brightening again. "But if my team ever got famous, I'd want them to say stuff like that about me." "Oh, you'll get there," he thought, ominously. He'd get there, alright, and it'd get so bad that he'd have to start fearing for his family and his wife because of his reputation. But for now, it was just a childish dream, and there was no reason to scare him. "Yeah?" He played along cheerily, "I'm sure you will someday." And then, he added, "So, these Sannin, huh? They're pretty legendary?" "Yeah. They're super legendary. Let's see, there's Orochimaru-san and Tsunadeheim and Jiraiya-sensei." He paused, before adding, "I think Tsunadeheim is still chonin though, and I'm pretty sure Orochimaru-san just turned jounin. Jiraiya-sensei just got inaugurated too." "Is that so?" "Lucky for him, He got the timeline without even having to ask around for it. 2 steaming bowls of miso ramen were placed in front of them, and the cook smiled at them indulgently. Minato grinned widely, in a way that made Naruto remember the way he used to when he was much younger and him and Iruka-sensei used to go out for ramen, except this time, the roles were switched. He was the older of the 2 who was reminiscing and Minato was the one who was grinning widely and chattering on. It made his heart thrum, remembering the Minato he would never see again, the one he was going to help defeat Kyuubi. Watching the boy in front of him, Naruto wondered if Neji was right. Was there such a thing called fate? Did this boy have the fate to die as a hero? He was about to follow suit and dig into his ramen when a voice stopped him from doing so. Oi, Minato-kun, keep eating like that and you're gonna empty this man's pockets. Minato laughed sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Planning to fob the bill on me, huh? Naruto smirked widely, as he handed the money to the cook anyways. "'Soke, I figured I would treat you anyways," but as he looked up, he tried not to gape. Jiraiya, who looked like a bit younger version of the one he knew, was smiling, hands on his hips like he was about to start a serious lecture as he rattled on to Minato about how that was a rather bad thing to do. Hypocrite, Naruto snorted. Jiraiya fobbed the bill on him all the time in the future, to the point that Naruto could have claimed bankruptcy. Honestly, Minato, you little prankster, it's okay. Naruto smiled pleasantly at his sensei-to-be. Minato helped me out anyways, so I thought it'd be fair to treat him. You'd be asking to go broke, right there. Jiraiya snorted, and Minato let out an indignant shout. Naruto smiled, but there was something melancholic to the edges of it. Ah well. I'd better get going, I have to turn in a mission report. See you guys around sometime? The 2 grinned at him. Sure. They said in unison, then turned to look at each other, already erupting in a new dispute about who was the original one and who was the word stealer. Naruto would have laughed at their replica of Obito and Kakashi's antics, except for the fact that it hurt to even remember the fact that Obito and Kakashi would never have another spat like that in front of him, because he'd never be able to see one again. In fact, as his subconscious snidely reminded him, he wouldn't see Rin either, or Kushina, or his father, which was probably what hurt the most, because the Minato he had just encountered was not the one he was hoping to see. He scuffed his feet in the dirt, watching as the last bits of light scattered over the horizon. He might as well go home, have some ramen with Sakura, and maybe get an actual mission from the old hag, get back in the swing of things. Maybe he'd talk with Kakashi-sensei, because he honestly needed someone to talk to about this besides Jiraiya, but he wasn't entirely sure that was allowed. In all honesty, he wished he could talk to Sasuke, but Sasuke was out and sound still with that pathetic excuse for a Sannin and probably wouldn't care to listen anyways. And more importantly, he was Sasuke. The bastard. Maybe Shikamaru would listen. Rin listened a lot like Shikamaru. Damn it, he was thinking in circles again. He could have slapped himself if he could. Why did he keep thinking about them? He was never going to be able to forget them at this rate. They probably already forgot him. He blinked back tears. Would they forget about him? Would they no longer think about him after a week or 2 that he was gone? He knew for a fact that Kakashi of his time was either an extremely good actor or he only remembered bits and pieces of the Naruto that had visited him back when he was Chunin. Well, Naruto wouldn't hold it against him. The boy was only about 9 or 10 when they met in the past, not to mention the fact he always seemed to get sick at the most inopportune of times. Would Minato name his firstborn child Naruto because of Jiraiya's book? Or because of the man he had met for a month or 2 while he was in the tumultuous process of becoming the Yondaime Hokage? Would Obito remember him even though Naruto had the sinking suspicion that Obito would be long gone, if Kakashi's left eye was anything to go by? Would Rin even remember him? Wherever she was in his timeline, whether she was dead or just wandering around in the same way Tsunade was? As the last outstretched hand of Peach spread over the mountains, the sun finally succumbing to the darkness of the moon, Naruto finished his seal. He didn't notice the tear that made his way down his face, rather, if he did, he chose to ignore it. Naruto had a moment to lie there in the deafening silence of the hill, nothing but the faint whisper of wind and the occasional rustling of the forest to break the heady quiet, before his eyes snapped open. He drew kunai from his pocket at lightning speed, throwing them out into the trees where they hit the branches and trunks with dull thuds. Immediately after he leapt into the air, to put some distance between him and his attacker as well as dodging the spray of shuriken that landed where he once lay. The blonde flipped in midair, landing soundlessly on his feet in a crouch, weapons drawn and waiting for his attacker to reveal himself. Turns out there was more than one, 4 figures dropping from the trees to the ground opposite the hill, and from here he could vaguely make out their defining features. One was obviously a girl, with blatant and fiery red hair, another with even more blatant and fiery orange hair, a shade of which reminded him grossly of his former jumpsuit, and another with faintly gray-silver hair, and the last, with dark black hair, almost blue in the current lighting, and spinning red eyes. "Sasuke," he whispered, thrown for a loop. As if he hadn't already gone through enough of an emotional roller coaster these past 24 hours to have him running to the nearest bathroom to throw up all he's ate in his lifetime. His former best friend, and the meaning to his life for the past 3 years, just had to show up now, of all inopportune moments. He narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" he called, to the boy whom he once thought of as his brother. The Uchiha said nothing though, his teammate speaking for him. Was it really him who's been causing all these chakra surges? The only female asked the Uchiha, incredulously. Half her hair was matted and wrangled looking, while the other was pinned straight. Had she been here, Sakura would have called that a fashion don't. This kid, the one with silver hair, balked, eyeing up the blonde. "I'd be surprised if he could hold a kunai right," Naruto growled, about to show them just how well he threw kunai when Sasuke lifted a hand, and his teammates immediately quieted. "Underestimating him will be your downfall," Sasuke warned. So he'd actually learned something noteworthy these past few years after all. Furthermore, we're to capture him alive. Capture? Unease crawled up his spine at what the word entailed. What did Orochimaru want with him? Whatever it was, it could be nothing good. He didn't voice his fear aloud, only chuckling. "Capture?" he echoed, mockingly. "What, so Orochimaru's got you on retrieval missions now? That's genin duty, Sasuke." He spit the name out with as much contempt as he could muster. "Genin duty?" The girl pitched, somewhat obnoxiously with her loud, high voice. "Please, this isn't your average retrieval duty. Orochimaru-sama has us working to Karen." Sasuke cut her off swiftly, eyes never once leaving Naruto. "He's baiting you. And you're falling for it." She flushed, but shut her mouth. "Is that all you guys are here for?" he tossed back. "Bickering and acting like children? Because if so, I was kinda in the middle of something and would really like to get back to it." Then Sasuke tilted his head, turning to him and surveying him coolly. "Finally stop chasing after me then, Dobi?" He threw the word that at one point could even be considered a backwards term of endearment out like it was trash. Naruto couldn't tell anything from his expression. Never. But he swallowed the bile in his throat and lifted his chin. "Maybe I realized there were better things to waste my time on." There was something there then, a flicker in those Sharingan. But Naruto couldn't be sure if it was anger at the insult or something more. Naruto cursed inwardly though. There was only so much time he could waste riling them up. And Sasuke had already blocked his only way of getting information. The girl had seemed his best way to gather more information, too. He was in the dark here, and he didn't like it. There wasn't anything in the world he could think of that he'd rather not do right now than fight through Sasuke and his new ragtag team of fucked up weirdos, and once more it seemed his best bet would be for a strategic retreat. And God, how he was starting to hate that phrase. It was really starting to define his life. There was little else he could do, though, so without another moment of waste he summoned as much of Kyuubi's power as he could, drawing it forth from the seal and probably waking up the demon in the process. It pulled and wrenched out of him until finally it erupted from the seal, a Vesuvian explosion of red-hot heat taking shape in a long, almost incomprehensibly tall pillar of magma-like fire, looming above them all and flickering in the sky. Jugo and Karen charged first, the other two lingering in the backdrop. At first, it looked like their vision had been blacked out by a genjutsu technique, but, once the fiery sensation of being burned at temperatures worthy of volcanic lava receded, they realized that this was not genjutsu. The fire was almost like a ring surrounding Naruto, hot and the color of red ochre, dancing with delight and lapping at grass and flesh alike. The two jumped back, holding their burnt appendages, and the entire group fled out of the circle. As the circle of fire moved, they realized that it was a large tail of burning fire, flickering about at Naruto's will. The fox, Sasuke realized, Naruto had called out the fox. He was controlling the fox. On his own. What kind of Kekai Genkai is this? Bemused the one with silver hair, looking far too excited at the prospect than he should be. What does it matter? The red-headed girl retorted, shaking out her left hand which was licked raw with burns and drawing weapons. We'll take him down either way. The silver-haired boy ran through seals rapidly as the girl sprinted forward, unleashing a barrage of shuriken and kunai alike. The blonde dodged them easily enough, and what he didn't, the large tail would swoop down, blocking for him and melting the metal into cooling drops of liquid on the ground. The girl backed off, cursing in annoyance. Damn, that's pretty hot. Probably not hot enough. The boy smirked. Sasuke turned to his silver-haired companion. Don't. That's the— but he had already finished up his hand seals, bellowing, Suiton, Suzausha. A wall of water erupted from the Suiton user, barreling straight into the large column of fire surrounding Naruto. Karen whipped at the hit, about to congratulate her teammate when the sound of hissing steam met her ears. A fine cloud of mist covered the blonde for a few moments, before the red of the fiery tail swept forward, revealing that the water jutsu hadn't done much of anything. Kyuubi no Kitsune. He finished. He moved on his body's own accord, his eyes never leaving the asphalt, as the water ran like mice scurrying around, flooding the sewers and soaking everything to the chill bone. He didn't notice, eyes dull and lifeless and his mind so caught up in contemplating why the hell he was even here to really do anything. For all he knew, he could have been in the desolate regions of Iwa, in the middle of the war with a Konoha headband, and he wouldn't have cared. At this point, he wouldn't have cared for anything. Without knowing it, without seeing or hearing or smelling, he sat down and sank slowly into the old leather of the stool, his form dripping like its very own rain shower, the dripping of his jacket going as fast as the pitter-patter of the storm on the other side. He was yet to realize where he was, wondering about more pressing matters, about why he was feeling like this, and how to forget. "Can I get you something?" Naruto said nothing, not even breaking out of his stupor. "Sir. Just a miso ramen." He hadn't even realized he had said anything, so used to sliding into a kairaku with stools like these that he hadn't noticed where he was, or where he could have been. "Okay, coming right up." "Huh?" Naruto started dumbly, finally pulling himself out of his depression-induced stupor to realize he had just said something. The man looked at him strangely. "Miso ramen, right?" "Oh, sure." Naruto agreed, wondering distantly how he had even said something without even remembering. He didn't even remember walking over here. Was he that in thought? The man behind the counter nodded, but Naruto wasn't really paying attention to him. In fact, he wasn't really paying attention at all. Naruto realized belatedly that he really didn't know what to do anymore. He didn't have to wait very long, though. His team turned to him, looking towards him with varying degrees of shock and apprehension. His face was impassive as always, the pinched, almost bored expression seeming to be ossified from stone into his facial features, but it still looked like it pained him to say the words, "We'll retreat for now, we can't beat him like this." They took off soon after that, and Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. The tail dispersed into wisps of flame, before eventually taking to the air in tendrils of smoke. He stared back into the forest where his best friend had once more disappeared to, and wondered at the numbness, the lack of emotion, which felt cold and unnatural in his stomach. Break. Naruto wanted to try it. He wanted to try it. As he forgot about the tears that dried on his cheeks, because he wanted to just see where it would end up. Actually, as far as those things concern, he wasn't really doing this for any sort of self-indulgence. Maybe he was, just not on a conscious level. He just needed to try it again, as an experiment, as a trial, just like it was supposed to be. And, while with one arm he carefully smoothed the ink brush over the glossy papyrus paper, the shop had, sadly, run out of rice paper in size 10 by 15, so he had to use the papyrus paper, and with the other he wiped his eyes, so that his tears wouldn't drip onto the paper. He sniffed, and told himself he hadn't, mainly because if he realized how upset he was over this, then he'd realize how depressed he had become too. Somewhere, between the fluttering wind that carried his emotions, and the dripping water, a beast opened its eyes slowly. Ram, dragon, tiger. The heavens rumbled and the earth quaked, and then the flash of blue was gone, and the hill had yet another crumpling paper on its side. It was raining, wherever he had landed. It was raining in sheets and torrents, and it soaked his black and orange jacket all the way through, the black undershirt clinging to his lean torso and soaking his skin. His hair dulled with the lack of sunlight, a faded saffron that matched his somber mood. His eyes didn't bother to leave the wet dew grass that it was watching dully, his rainy eyes a melancholy blue. He didn't bother. What was the point anymore? What was the point in anything? What was the reason that he even bothered to get up in the morning when everything had been stripped of him the moment he had been born, and from then on he had to climb with blood-drenched hands and scars, the lifestyle of someone who never had a chance? The rain was soft, a pitter-patter and a faint rustle of trees in the wind. He wondered where he was. But, he didn't bother, couldn't bother, and he trudged through the forestry and down the muddy grass, a small current of water passing by the wet verdant blades. His feet moved in slow patterns, soft and barely even noticeable. He moved so slowly it didn't look like he was moving at all. His face turned to the ground, watching the current move around his feet, puddles forming in some places and the dirt started to upturn itself. The water splashed as he moved about, but it was raining so hard and fast it seemed it'd never end. With his conscious a broken mess of emotions and heart, his subconscious was the one to smell the ramen from somewhere along the water-laden street.